Good morning, you all. We're all here. I'm going to go ahead and start us. It's 9 a.m. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Monterey Peninsula Airport District Board of Directors, November 18th, 2020. Due to COVID, we do have a prescribed way for the public to communicate with us. So if you can look on our website with the agenda, we've got all of the rules, but basically you can participate in the Zoom meeting. And if you don't have access to the internet, you can call in and enter the same meeting with the same ID number. So if you would like to comment on an item that is on the agenda, you may do so during the presentation, right after the presentation of that item and prior to the board discussing it. If you have something that you would like to say on something not on the agenda, we'll have a moment to do that in a few minutes. So please keep your comments to 3 minutes. That's important. And with that, I will do a call to order. Amanda, would you do the roll call, please?
Dr. Sani?
Here.
Director Curcio?
Here.
Director Sabo?
Here.
Director Miller? Chair Leffel?
Here. Thank you. We'll have to tie him to a seat. With that, I'm going to do a pledge of allegiance. If you would join me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do we have any communications, announcements, or informational items that are not on the agenda?
None from staff.
Mike, hit your mute, would you?
Yes.
Do we have anything
No,
from
no, the microphone. There you
any of our other board members? All right, thank you. At this time, I will call for public comment on any item that is not on the agenda. And you can, if you are on Zoom, you can raise your hand.
You got one hand raised. Alice Angel Green.
All right, Ms. Green. I believe you.
Sorry, I was muted. I apologize.
That's okay.
All right. My name is Alice Angel Green, and I live at 16 Saucedo Avenue in Delray Oaks. Section 54950 of the Ralph M. Brown Act, entitled Policy Declaration, states, quote, "In enacting this chapter, the legislature finds and declares that the public commissions, boards and councils, and the other public agencies in the state exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. It is the intent of the law that their actions be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly. The people of the state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people, in delegating authority, do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created," unquote. What does attending an open and public meeting of a legislative body mean? Traditionally, it means that legislative representatives and the people they have sworn to represent gather together in a public space. Everyone in attendance knows who else is at the meeting, and by gathering together in this way are able to view and interact with one another. Because of the pandemic, public meetings need to be held electronically, with most people physically isolated from one another. However, Various formats exist in which these types of meetings can be held. Prior to August of 2020, the airport board used a Zoom format, which allowed everyone in attendance to not only know who else was there, but to be able to interact with all in attendance via text comment and discussion. Using this type of format preserved the open public gathering nature of traditional public meetings as much as possible. When the board changed formats, limiting the ability of the public to know who else was in attendance and eliminating the texting option people could use to interact with one another, the meetings ceased to be truly open and public, and as such are in violation of the intent of the Brown Act. The board should reinstate its use of the more public format, which it used successfully on several occasions. By choosing the more restrictive format, the board is essentially deciding, quote, what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know, unquote, thereby violating the Brown Act policy declaration, which says the people do not give their public servants the right to do this. That the governor is allowing this format to be used and the fact that some other jurisdictions are using it does not in any way change the nature of the violation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment on any item that is not on the agenda? All right, seeing no other hands raised, I will close public comment. We have a consent agenda. We have several items on there. Would any member of the board wish to pull one of the items for further discussion?
Yes, Chair Leffel, this is Director Sabo. I'd like to pull the item regarding the minutes of the Air Services Committee meeting. And I'm looking to see where that is right now.
It's number
What
7
it is
or 3.
on page 1 of page, it's the minutes of the Air Carrier Service Marketing Community Relations Committee meeting. I want to pull that.
Bill, there are 2 of them. There's October 9th and November 10th. Which one?
November 10th.
All right, thank you. That's item number 7. Anyone else like to pull anything for further discussion? Any member of the public wishing to pull an item? Is that a hand up, Ms. Green?
I believe that's from before.
Thank you. Okay. So I would entertain a motion on items 1 through 6 on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Director Curcio moves
Second.
and Director Sani seconds. Do we have any discussion on these items? Anything from the public? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public. Anybody from the board want to discuss any of those items before we vote on them? All in favor? Roll call, please.
Dr. Sani,
Yes.
Dr. Curcio,
Yes.
Director Sabo,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Chair Leffel.
Yes, thank you. All right, we have a deferred consent agenda, which was item number 7, minutes of the committee meeting of the Air Carrier Service Marketing Community Relations Committee on November 10th, 2020. Would you like to take the lead on this, Director Sabo?
Yes. I have some additions to the minutes of that meeting that were omitted in the printed report that came out in our board packet. Would you like me to read them and then I can provide them to Amanda after the meeting in a format where she can include it in our minutes of our meeting, today's meeting? What would you like?
I'd love to hear you read them. Go for it.
I didn't hear what you wanted me to do.
Please read them. Yes.
Oh, read them? Okay. There are 3 items that I wanted to add to that, the minutes of that meeting. Item 1 was Director Sabo inquired as to why there were no noise or air service reports available for the committee. Executive Director Lapierre indicated that having the committee meeting 10 days after the month's end did not allow sufficient time for staff to make these reports available to the committee. Item 2, Director Sabo inquired about the status of the previously discussed possible agreement with Northern California TRACON regarding increased use of visual approaches to runway 26 left during visual meteorological conditions, VMC, to reduce noise over the residential communities east of Monterey. Executive Director Lapierre indicated that NorCal has not responded to his email inquiry for 10 days. Executive Director Lapierre will follow up next week. Item 3, Director Sabo inquired about marketing efforts aimed at the local community to encourage use of the Monterey Airport during the COVID crisis versus traveling to San Jose International. Executive Director here indicated that he had no plans to do any local marketing outreach. That's the end of the additional items.
I would object to the last one.
Okay, I will open that up for discussion. Mr. Lapierre?
I have no trouble with the first 2 additions. The third is incorrect. I did not say that we would not be doing marketing, and that is incorrect. We do marketing on a regular basis. In fact, I did show the committee the new marketing advertisement or commercial that we had run. So I would object to the language in that. I do not object to its presence, but I did not tell the committee that we would not be marketing.
Donnie?
Yes, I was there. We did review the commercial that is currently, I think it was a holiday commercial, in fact, encouraging the local residents to use MRI and the airport for their flights. I would agree with Director Lapierre just to maybe reword the final, the number 3. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Sabo?
Yeah, I think it's more a matter of what I thought I said and what Director Lapierre heard me to say. What I was going for was trying to do outreach via the media and other vehicles to demonstrate that we have a very safe and secure operation here. And in fact, we have right now we're running some cheaper airfares than San Jose International. I was concerned about the extent to which we may be, and in some cases I already know of, we're losing our normal passengers.
Director Sabo, this is about the wording of number 3.
Yeah, I'm trying to tell you, okay? I'm trying to decide whether to pull that item on. So you asked me and I'm telling you. So that was what was intended. And so I will pull that item off, though. Just let's leave it at the first 2.
All right, so the timing of the meeting and the non-response from TRACON, those are the 2 items that you are asking to be added to the meeting minutes. Director
Correct.
Sani, since you're there, would you want to second that or not?
I can go ahead and second that
All right,
addition.
board, any discussion on this? Okay. Public? Okay. Amanda, would you please do a roll call? Oh, I guess I'll need a motion. well, oh, I do have a first and a second. Sorry. Go ahead. Amanda, can I have a roll call?
Director Sani,
Aye.
Director Curcio,
Yes.
Director Sabo,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Chair Leffel.
Yes, thank you. And just, I want to say, I saw the TV ad a couple of days ago, and I really, really liked it.
Good.
It really portrays that we're cleaning the airport and doing a lot of disinfecting and that sort of thing, and it encourages people to fly. So I thought it was a good ad.
Thank you.
It popped up on something that we were watching.
Good,
So
thank
thank you. Okay. We will move to the regular agenda. We have a presentation from the future of the Navy Flying Club by Navy Flying Club representatives.
And I don't know.
And I do
Madam
not
Chair,
see
that
anyone
I see Keith next, perhaps.
is there someone on the participants list who is representing the Navy Flying Club?
If there is, use the raise your hand feature.
There is not.
Do you want to pass that out and come
Okay,
back to it?
what I'm gonna do is, with the motion of the board, we would move this to a later item for
Yeah.
when they show, and maybe Director Lapierre, you could have someone call them.
Yeah, we can. It is not surprising that they didn't show, so we'll make the call and confirm that they're not coming.
Okay, we'll
There's
give them
been
the
a change.
opportunity since
Sure.
they're on the agenda.
Yeah.
Can I have a motion to move this down to item number 3, and we'll just move 2 and 3 up?
So moved.
Second.
We have a first from Director Sani and a second from Director Curcio. Any discussion, anything from the public? All right, Amanda, would you do a roll call, please?
Director Sani,
Yes.
Director Curcio,
Yes.
Director Sabo,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Chair Leffel.
Yes, thank you. All right, so our new item number 1 will be a presentation and a potential adoption of resolution number 1787, a resolution of the Monterey Peninsula Airport District approving the rules and regulations and minimum standards. And with that, there's an item number 2, and we'll vote on them separately, but they are together. Ordinance number 927, an ordinance of the Monterey Peninsula Airport District repealing ordinance number 796. So, before we start that, I have one question. We're repealing an ordinance, but we're putting in place a resolution?
Yes.
I was
Yeah,
confused.
I'll explain that in
Okay.
the presentation.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so who is leading this?
I'll kick it off. It's been a long haul to get us to the point where we can present to you formal rules and regulations and minimum standards. We've been working on this for the last couple of years. We finally are at a point where we can present it to the board for action. I want to acknowledge the great work that Scott and my operations team did to make this happen. These are documents that we refer to, particularly the rules and regulations, we refer to in every lease that we have, but we don't have the document behind that. So every lease calls out rules and regulations. You will adhere to rules and regulations, but we've never had those in place. We will now have those in place should the board choose to adopt these. Minimum standards are the beginning of how we will better manage who does business on the airport and what the requirements of doing business on the airport are. Operations team did hold a couple of public listening sessions, which they'll tell you about. I've asked them to start with a recap of the presentation that they did, so you can see what in fact they presented to the public and the number of people that did attend and any of the questions that were raised. So if you don't mind, we'll let Ken and Mark begin that process.
Mr. Griggs, you are on.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Well, good morning, Chairwoman Leffel and members of the board. Ken Griggs, Airport Operations Manager, and along with Mark Curtis, Operations Supervisor, we will walk you through the two new proposed policy documents for your consideration today of approval and adoption. As Executive Director Lapierre mentioned, today's presentation will mirror the presentation we conducted at two separate listening sessions for our tenants, one held at the very end of October and the other one on November 4th. And this was to give tenants an overview of the documents that were available to be viewed in draft mode online, and just to go over them with some background information and a chance for them to comment in writing preferably, but also we have an opportunity at the end of each session for them to address any clarification concerns on the presentation. So at this point, we'll go ahead and get started, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with the presentation. I believe you have copies of them in your board packet, and I'm going to try to find what I did with this presentation. Okay. Okay. Okay, it looks like I have difficulty sharing it, but I have the presentation up. I trust you can follow the handouts in your board packet. That's okay.
We need to have it up so also the public can see it.
Okay.
Amanda, could you go help Ken, please?
Well, while they're doing that, how about if I jump in and sort of
that's great.
do an introduction here while they're looking for that. And Ken, interrupt me as soon as you are ready to go. Madam Chair and board members, the airport, as mentioned in the staff report, has the ability to enact ordinances and regulations to govern certain activities on the airport. The difference between rules and regulations and minimum standards are I'm hitting a 30,000-foot aerial view. Rules and regulations deal with all kinds of acceptable behavior on the airport, whether it's from a patron, a tenant, what have you, anybody, any member of the public. Minimum standards are sort of the entry level, minimum level that we want our tenants or businesses to operate at. As I mentioned, rules and regulations outline proper conduct, and in some instances it outlines improper conduct. It deals with things like storage of chemicals, fire safety, transport of aviation fuels, environmental regulations, things along those lines. Certain motor vehicle operation requirements are in there as well. It is not intended to replace all of the ordinances, although it is going to, as we'll talk about in a moment, it is going to replace one of them, and I'll discuss why in just a moment. But it works really in tandem with the ordinances of the airport. And as I mentioned, minimum standards are really related to the threshold entry requirements as far as qualifications, level of service, licenses, insurance requirements for companies that wish to do business here on airport property. The difference between, to Chair Leffel, to answer your question, rules and regulations and ordinances have a similar legal effect, but ordinances are much more difficult to enact. You can still enforce a rule and regulation equally as strongly as you can an ordinance, so there's not much difference there. Let me give you an example. The ordinance that we're repealing today has several paragraphs about animal care and treatment, and dog relief or animal relief areas, and it outlines, it mentions, I'll just use as an example, that dogs may not relieve themselves anywhere in an area where it's not located, where it's not marked for that purpose. There really isn't a need to have that as an ordinance. You can do that as a regulation. And the reason why it's better to do it as a regulation, if we designate an animal relief area in an ordinance, and then we want to move it and change it, it takes 60 days plus publication in the newspaper to do that. When the reality is, it'd be much easier to have it in as part of the rules and regulations, bring that to the board, say, look, we've got a relief area that has just changed. Board says, great, okay, and it's instantly changed. So many of those things that we have in the rules and regulations are standards that are set by the board that can be enforced in similar fashion to ordinances. They can still be subject to citations and enforcement by airport staff. It's really more of a convenience factor to be able to modify them as needed.
That makes sense.
It's a whole lot easier to do it. It really is the basic reason why.
Okay.
So,
Director, I see I have raised hands, but I would like to, if you can hold your questions, unless you've got something that was, I would like you to hold your questions until after Mr. Griggs gives his presentation.
I think he's ready now. I see it up on
The
the.
question I had was for Scott on what he just said. So,
Okay, go ahead.
Scott, so you started to answer my question in the end, but you're saying we can enforce criminal sanctions with a resolution and not an ordinance?
Well, you added a word that I didn't add. You added the word criminal. So the items that are in the rules and regulations can be dealt with in a manner that will utilize a fee schedule, fees for infractions. While it does have a criminal overtone to it, there is sort of an overarching principle there. In general, we can enforce it, but you likely are not going to have things like criminal enforcement of a dog that's walking down the jetway that relieves itself there. You would utilize a different mechanism for that. You give someone a notice saying, look, we're going to have some remedial measure. You can't bring your dog next time, or that dog is prohibited in the future. So to answer your question, it would not be in a criminal context, but it would still have an enforcement procedure that will be utilized with a fine or a fee schedule associated with it.
Okay, Chair Leffel,
Just a
my
second.
question was for Scott.
Director Sabo, just a second. Did that answer your question, Director Miller?
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm not saying everything needs to be handled as a crime, but if somebody says, well, my dog needs to go to the bathroom, I'm going to let it go to the bathroom. What are you going to do about it? What do they do about it?
Well, that's something where we can prevent that animal from coming here in the future. We can certainly issue I forget the term that's used in the rules and regulations.
Notice of violation.
A notice of violation. And at a certain point, you can prohibit someone from utilizing the airport if it becomes a significant enough problem. That would certainly not be the first measure you'd go to, of course, but most of the things that are in there are things that I suspect you wouldn't want to criminally prosecute in any measure anyway.
Yeah, and it's kind of important at this point to probably note that the documents as will be presented do not include the fine requirements or the fine structure, or the fee structure, or any of that. We've decided internally to not ask you to put that into place until we get to budget next year. That gives us some time to help educate the users, educate the tenants on what we will expect them to adhere to once we ask you to formally adopt a fine structure. So kind of a soft open to rules and regulations enforcement. We'll issue warnings, we'll issue notices, but we will not ask for authorization to fine.
Let me, Carl, to use your, or Director Miller, to use your example, let me take it to a different avenue. As it relates to security, for example, if individuals are, one of the things that's in the rules and regulations is that people can't sleep in the airport, in the lobbies or in the airport, on premises. There are criminal components that you can already utilize, like trespassing and things like that. If you give a notice of violation of the rules to someone who's violating the rules, there are other criminal laws available if need be in other settings that already exist. This just makes it so that the personal conduct type of issues we can deal with, just on a sort of a non-criminal basis, on sort of a less serious basis.
Okay, I do think moving forward, we need to educate our police officers on the best way to proceed, and then what criminal sanctions they could use if somebody violates it, but not to enforce our rules and regulations.
Okay, thank you.
And
Director.
in a criminal fashion, like issue citations for.
Okay.
Director Sabo?
Yes, thank you. When, this is for Scott, when, particularly in regards the rules and regulations, when the rules and regulations are adopted and subsequently revisions are made to them, is there any requirement for the public to be notified that these are rules and regulations, particularly where they might involve some kind of sanctions for a violation? Is the public to be notified of this, or do we just arbitrarily do it on our own internally within the administration for the changes to the rules and regulations?
So changes to rules and regulations would be done by the board, by adopting the policy. These things will be, it will be noticed on, on the agenda. It will also be, these will be posted on the website so people can routinely, refer to them. Fines and violations would not occur until after that process has been completed. And to be very candid with you, I suspect on most of these items, fines are not really going to be utilized. What we're trying to get with this is compliance. This is not a revenue generating measure. It's really just to get people to comply. And so as long as people, will comply with a notice of violation, that's in most instances sufficient.
Okay, so I'm having a little trouble, Scott, with your mask. It's a little bit garbled for me, and it may be my elderly hearing here, but do I understand that any changes to any rules and regulations or the minimum standards, any changes to those will be come before the board for consideration in a public session before they are changed? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. It doesn't say that in the rules and regulations. It doesn't say that in the minimum standards, unless I'm incorrect.
It doesn't, but if they are passed with a resolution, anything that's passed with a resolution can only be changed by a resolution. Ordinances can only be changed with a subsequent ordinance. You can't change an ordinance just by deciding to do so. So anything that's passed with a resolution, to modify it, it must come back with a subsequent resolution.
Okay, I guess that's implied. I would have felt more comfortable if it had been referenced how these things are reviewed by the board and the public before they were issued. Okay, thank you for answering the question.
Okay, thank you. Director Sabo, will you take your hand down so if it comes up again, I'll know it's new? Thank you. Okay, Mr. Griggs.
Thank you.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and get started here. I trust you can see the screen now.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the first document we'll talk about is the rules and regulations. And basically the rules and regulations, as emphasized by Scott Huber, involves the day-to-day conduct of each person's responsibilities here on airport property and their duties typically here on the airport, whether they're a tenant, employee, user, or even a passenger or a customer in certain instances that this will apply to. And that's paramount because it's to ensure the safe, secure, and efficient and environment sound operation of the airport, sort of the continuity of compliance to make sure that everybody has a role and responsibility here at the airport. And it also basically applies for entities as well, for commercial or business purposes, and anyone that has an agreement or some type of lease with the airport, that this applies as well in the document. As discussed, there is a civil infraction, citation, and penalty process, and we'll discuss this a little more later in the presentation. So there are 10 articles in this document, and we'll go over each article here briefly, except for Article 1. Article 1 basically just addresses the rules of engagement and the purpose of the document. So Article 2, talks about the general regulations and security responsibilities. So security responsibilities is a big part of this document for commercial operators and badge holders, specifically that need to adhere to requirements within the airport security plan and TSA regulations in general. There is some overlap with the program. We do have an infraction process with the security plan. As an example, we have a 3 strikes program for security incidents. There's no monetary application on that. It's just there's consequences within that program. So this section addresses some of the overarching requirements to make sure all badge holders and users of the airport follow the security plan and other parameters in this article. It also talks about how the executive director has the full authority to interpret rules, directives, and emergency procedures should they be ambiguous, or if there's some contrary understanding that other documents have more weight. There's an interpretation ability to make that clear under his discretion. Article 3 talks a lot about personal conduct. These are basically the day-to-day operations, such as users to comply with signage on property, the non-interference with airport operations, to where they need to understand the enforcement mechanisms provided by district staff, and them being subjected to cooperation with airport staff in general. It applies to animals and animal conducts. There's a good chunk of information within the airport operations area, how someone needs to make sure they adhere to these rules and regulations involving an animal, and how if there are the needs for a certain type of animals, whether it's through the traveling public or through an employee or anybody else that needs an animal on site, there are certain restrictions and safeguards in place. Commercial activities, it addresses stuff like filming, photography, advertising, and displaying information. A lot of it's in the terminal building or even within on airport property. the requirements to submit applications and review and processes alike. It also talks about access to moving areas, just a general FAA requirement for users on how to taxi on the moving areas, and navigation around airport property to and from certain leaseholds, the terminal ramp. There's provisions about no loitering here, especially in the airport terminal, and what those apply and how those are interpreted. And also addresses preservation of property to make sure that officials, airport staff, and other agencies need to be either notified or that there are safeguards in place to make sure there aren't any compromises for issues, whether there's incidents or accidents, and for everyone to comply with the investigative process. Article 4 talks about environmental matters. There's a large area that addresses the handling and use of hazardous materials. Those are basically addresses tenants, users who have a need to transport materials on and off airport property. The requirements based on federal and local and state regulations to house hazard materials on property, the storage requirements, and the labeling thereof. It addresses the use of ramps, buildings, and equipment, and how those apply to each responsibility, depending what type of business you operate on the airfield, in a safe manner that's funneled through the appropriate channels, whether that's through the fire review process, airport staff, properties review process, and other means to make sure that all the equipment are assured to be in proper compliance. Also talks about the control of contaminants, such as aircraft washing, vehicle washing, the do's and don'ts of that. The airport has a pretty stringent stormwater prevention pollution program here. It addresses best management practices and also responsibilities of users to make sure that there aren't any compromises to the stormwater system, and also other things that may erode pavement, such as reporting requirements for oil, fuel spills, and the like.
Okay, Article 5, fire and safety. So the first part deals with fueling operations. That covers both commercial and general. The commercial fuelers obviously go for extensive training, so should be fully aware of what and what isn't expected of them. But the sort of things we've highlighted, things like aircraft aren't to be fueled inside any buildings or structures. One thing we want to bring notice to is that any fuel spills should be reported by calling 911, no matter how big or small it is. It then be up to the fire service to determine whether they need to attend. Storage of materials, again, hazardous materials. Anyone storing materials on the airport should be aware of the do's and don'ts of that. A lot of these things are covered by our annual fire inspections, where the fire marshal comes out and checks basically every structure, and this is one of the things they sort of check on their inspections. Aircraft use within hangars, so minor repairs are acceptable, basically provided no open flames are used. On the ramp, minor repairs are allowed, providing they don't sort of impact any other operations. No doping, spray painting, or paint stripping inside hangars, which again, people should be aware of. And then the fire extinguisher requirements, again, we have a yearly inspection where that is drummed into every tenant, where we just check that fire extinguishers are serviceable and sort of within date.
So Article 6 addresses aeronautical operations. It's a fairly wide category that addresses many overlap requirements that the FAA expects for handling the use of aircraft operations for safe use on property. It talks about the compliance with orders, the indemnification to hold harmless of the airport based on the egregious use and non-compliance of pilots if they don't follow the requirements in this document, the type of prohibited operations and the liabilities thereof, and also the denial of use of the airport that the executive director has a right to impose based on the lack of cooperation in this article. It talks about the responsibilities of the aircraft users during any emergency to report the accident and incident regardless of the level. It's to make sure that we have all the responding tools available to support the incident, the accident, and also our reporting requirements to other agencies as needed. It addresses disablements and the need for us to respond to assist aircraft to make sure that we remain open and to do so in a safe fashion, that it's the user's responsibility to notify us. Talks about airport operational restrictions and areas. Each airfield is different in geography and geometry, and just that the user understands where there are certain limitations here on the airport. Talks about taxiing ground and gate rules. One of the big things here is our engine runs that are assigned at designated areas there's been some compromised issues where we've seen aircraft runs on aprons or areas that are not approved. So this standardizes a regulation to make sure users know where to go for that. It talks about passenger enplanement and deplanement operations and how to maneuver when these operations are in place, especially for ground vehicles, ground support equipment, and employees of the do's and don'ts of how to proceed, especially on the commercial ramp. And then also other airport-wide directives. And there's some other regulations that we have that gives us the ability to refer to under the subsection, such as the vehicle and operation use on airport property and other documents that we have here currently.
So Article 7, motor vehicles. So the thing to note is, as per the board, the California Vehicle Code applies to all roadways at the airport. That is landside and airside. The sort of things we're looking at here is to make sure that vehicles aren't coming in with unsafe loads, that vehicles are roadworthy, this kind of thing. Within the airport operations, the airport operations area, excuse me, we are looking to see that vehicles are parked in correct spaces, and when parked and unattended, that they have the correct AOA permits in place. Obviously, everyone should know already that aircraft have the right of way at all times. One thing we do see a little of is vehicles on the commercial ramp driving along the service road when aircraft beacons are flashing. That's a big no-no, so that's the sort of thing we'll be looking out for. And obviously the code runs alongside any airport ordinances and also these rules and regulations. So it's just something to bear in mind. Generally, traffic citations and tickets, so operations will be issuing these NOVs alongside the police department. However, when it comes to traffic citations, I think it'll probably be more law enforcement, just because obviously there's a little more with the vehicle code, something that they're more aware of. So I think law enforcement generally, when it comes to traffic, will be dealing more with the NOVs rather than the ops department.
Article 8 addresses religious, charitable, and political activities. There are general requirements of conduct for individuals or organizations who would like to issue leafletting, conduct picketing, or other solicitation acts. And there's emphasizes processes for them to be able to do so, restrictions or limitations on location, hours of operation, and whether that's in the best interest of the airport to proceed with their activity. It gives them the tools or for us the tools to issue permits or find a permitting system that they can look at, and it's a standardization mechanism that we could use, and they have the availability of, if they request a change, to do so on a case-by-case basis. The general requirements and within this rules and regulations is to emphasize not to obstruct with regular airport operations, not to hinder the regular access in and out with regular passengers, and to make sure that other operations are not affected. It talks about newspaper distribution requests. There's a news rack in the terminal building downstairs. We just don't allow any newspaper company to bring their newspapers in. It's a review process, and if it meets district approval, then there's a process mechanism for them to follow, and if not, then the enforcement of this document allows staff to take action if necessary.
So Article 9 is violations. So basically, by conducting business at the airport, you're agreeing to comply with the rules and regulations. Enforcement will be by way of the notice of violation. That's something we're designing at the minute. We're in contact with other airports just to see what sort of what ideas they're using, and obviously once we've come up with a design, that'll be passed up higher up the chain, and that'll be either accepted or asked to be reworked on before it obviously goes live.
And that's what Article 10 addresses in detail, is this notice of violation article, where district staff will have the ability to assess the weight of the violation and use to issue an infraction. The whole intention is to bypass the traditional court system, have a civil infraction process that we could take care of in-house. We believe that eventually, when monetary penalties will be assessed at some point, that this will help this document become more whole, in a way that we see cooperation and for them the ability to ask us more questions instead of just taking things for granted and assuming certain routines that they've been conducting are acceptable. We did some homework and checked with other airports, and that has been the case, where there's been a lot more collaboration because of this. Infractions may have different weights accordingly. That's something we will discuss internally and what that may look like. Somebody that's dumping fuel down a storm drain might have some different consequences versus somebody who litters on the sidewalk, for example. So there are some different aspects we need to look at here to see how we can send that message. The current security strike program, as I alluded to, there are some overlap as far as the enforcement process. We'll look at that in-house. Our goal is not to really double whammy anyone, but we'll have to see and work with our friends from TSA and how that looks and what works best for us. There is a significant section here about the appeals process. It discusses how a formal hearing process can be performed and the steps, the timeline, and the response for the appeal on an infraction, and how the eventuality, the final verdict is given, is also discussed in this document. So that pretty much wraps this document. Just a cartoon that shows just chaos going on the ramp, and rest assured we don't have that here, but it just reiterates the importance of having some rules and regulations in place, and that way we could make sure that we meet all of our safety and security protocols. So the next presentation we have for you are minimum standards, and this document is something that's very traditional in the airport industry. A lot of airports use it as a grounds to meet certain benchmark requirements, as certain businesses need to provide certain type of aeronautical services or activities, and spells out the qualifications, types of services, facilities, permits, and licensing, and especially insurance. That's a big one for us, is the insurance processes. It also makes sure that anyone who has a business provides commodities and services that are fair, that do not discriminate, that are there's an ability to have competition for those who want to have or challenge other users with business on airport property, that they're being given a chance to be reviewed. And it also aligns with the FAA grant assurance requirements, to where we can standardize a lot of maybe misconceptions or filtering that make sure there's an even playing field. So when we had these listening sessions, one of the slides we thought is, and maybe a lot of questions would come our way, would how does this affect me? So basically we just try to, we emphasize that everyone who has a business on airport property in some shape or form already has a lease or an agreement or permit of some sort, and we plan to really dovetail this policy document into the existing lease agreements. So it's not reinventing the wheel necessarily, but just sending information out that this is a requirement to look at, and for them to work with our property management folks and what else needs to be submitted, if anything at all. It protects everyone, including the airport, for those folks who don't have adequate insurance requirements. And there's one article in this document that specifically addresses that, and we'll cover this here a little bit later. It also sends a message about certain types of operations that need to maintain certain standards for how they function on airport property based on their services, such as infrastructure, what are their work hours, how many employees do they need to make sure demand is met, and also that they have the appropriate certifications that they are entitled to serve the community based on what business they have. So there are 7 articles in this document, and we'll address each one of them here as well. Article 1 talks about the purpose, application, and waiver. It's basically the need to let everyone know that, since we are a user fee airport, we receive public funds, that there's an obligation to make sure everything's in a fair and reasonable basis on terms. There is also a provision that we don't accept exclusive rights because we accept federal funded monies from the FAA, and that the FAA does not allow exclusive rights for the purpose of this document. But there is an ability for waiver modifications based on unique circumstances that does not conflict with the purpose of this document and will not become discriminatory in nature. Article 2 talks about the permitting and licensing process. I alluded to just if I was a hangar tenant or an FBO, what else I need to submit. Well, if you're a new operator, we are looking into what type of aeronautical business plan may need to be submitted, and the business plan addresses certain checklists that could let us know what their purpose of activities are, and the plan can be used as part of an entry requirement to obtain a business license or an agreement with the airport. So as we move forward after the adoption of this document, the property management staff will look at current leases and agreements and how these minimum standards can be represented accordingly. This article also talks about temporary aeronautical permits for operators that here are just on a short-term basis and how that can function within their needs. Article 3 talks about just general provisions. There's a lot of just legalese in here, indemnification parameters. It talks about certain termination clauses. Again, something that's not really new, what's already currently available in a lot of lease documents. One of the big things for us is the need for notification for any facility improvements or modifications. This standardizes a process for anyone to make sure if they want to make any improvements to go through the planning review checklist and other things that our property management folks look at prior to the actually implementation of their project. Talks about subleasing, licensing, permitting without approval and the consequences thereof, and the need for them to reach out for us if, for example, if a hangar tenant wants a sublease, giving the reasons and also the appropriate documents that we need for either acceptance or denial.
Article 4 covers insurance. So as we all know, anyone conducting business at the airport is required to carry insurance. This is obviously explained to anyone applying for a permit or a lease, but Article 4 just explains the various insurances and minimum amounts. So again, people would either need all or some of the insurances listed in Section 4. Article 5, general operational requirements. So again, this is just what's expected of any business, and it covers such things as the rates and charges, how people will act, when conducting their business, regulation compliance. So basically, any commercial operator will comply and observe with all rules, regulations, ordinances, and laws. And covers such things as vehicle identification on the airport as well. So it's just a general overview of what's expected.
So Articles 6 and 7 is probably the meat and potatoes of this document. This defines and labels the expectancies of commercial operators. In this particular case, Article 6 talks about fixed-based operators, how the FAA views them in 3 different categories. You have the full-service fixed operators, such as Del Monte Aviation and the Monterey Jet Center here. A limited service FBO is considered basically a step below that. Some of you remember the Monterey Bay Aviation days. They were considered a limited service FBO just because of the type of aircraft and services they provided. And then licensed operators is really anybody else those who have specialized services, and we'll get into that here a little bit later. But it addresses the requirements for the qualification of staff, the training that needs to be performed to meet the requirements on a commercial airport and generally, or specifically the hours of operation, and the ability for them to, if they say this is what they're doing, to actually follow through and service the type of equipment that they will obtain their certification experience with. And also if they do fueling, the type of fueling requirements that they need to adhere to. So Article 7 is specialized aviation services. It talks about everybody else. And there's a large component of that, especially here in the airfield. And examples are maintenance repair operations, which is a Part 65 certificate operation. And there are standards and requirements to make sure that the services they provide to users, that they meet those thresholds. We have a few independent A&P mechanics in the airfield, and we also have a couple Part 61 and Part 41 flight training schools or clubs and sales services on the airfield. So there, in this document, it addresses some of those benchmark requirements and how they should be followed, and also if there are any conflicts of interest or substandards that they be reviewed, that airport staff will have the ability to review and see what needs to be done to have them at a standard that's acceptable for the airport. It addresses mobile operators and rental car concessions, and it's not really a big concern here, although the concern with mobile operators are the insurances. You have fractional corporate jets like NetJets that choose to have their own mobile MRO folks come out from different airports to service aircraft, and generally we don't know about them, and this document allows us to move forward to make sure we get insurance requirements and also a permitting requirement that they are allowed to be on our airport premises. Talks about here towards the end of Article 7, environmental impairment liability coverage, and it really addresses the liabilities for all the fuel storage facilities on the airport, and to make sure that the proper insurance thresholds are absorbed into the type of aviation fuels they serve, and that we also have those on file.
So this is the timeline we anticipate. So obviously today is the meeting where we're discussing it, and pass to print will take place. Next month, December the 16th, is the second reading. That's when we anticipate the documents being formally adopted by the board. January the 16th is when we expect the documents to start to be implemented. That date is provisional. It could change depending. That would come from the executive director if that date did change. So January the 16th, we start the enforcement. Then we'll be actually handing out the notice of violations for the first 6 months of the program. The violation will be issued, but it won't be any monetary charge. That gives us the chance to get used to the whole process and all the paperwork involved. And it also gives the airport users the chance to know that we're now sort of looking at behavior, and gives people a chance to change any bad habits they may get into, they may have gotten into that creates a violation. As Scott said earlier, this is all about enforcement rather than sort of generating money. Then we anticipate July, during that meeting, the charges being introduced, and going on from then, we would think the NOVs will carry a monetary penalty.
So this was a conclusion slide, we gave all those participants in our listening session the ability to submit comments. And we received a couple. The attendance was fairly low, but we at this point will conclude our presentation, and thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to the public for comments, questions.
If anyone has any questions or comments, use the raise your hand feature. And Madam Chair, Alice Angel Green.
I see Alice Angel Green, please.
Hello, excuse me. This is actually Douglas McKenzie.
All
And
right.
the question I have, do these rules and regulations apply to the operation of the flight school? I understand that it would in terms of their facilities and so on and so forth, but does it apply to their flight restrictions and that sort of thing? Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Mr. Keith Gray.
Okay. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to address the board. I apologize. I was a little ill last week with a stomach flu and couldn't get with Mike. But I just kind of want to take this opportunity to address myself or to the board. And my name is Keith Gray, and I'm currently the president of the Monterey Flying Club Auxiliary, which I'm sure many of you haven't heard of because we're newly formed. But we're kind of a support auxiliary, just like the Coast Guard Auxiliary was formed to support the Coast Guard. We formed before COVID.
Mr. Gray, we pulled your item and we added it onto the back of the agenda because you were not on the call. But if you want to address the standards and the minimum rules, you can talk at this time. But otherwise, if you're going to talk about the flying club, I need you to wait until I call that item on the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll wait on that then. My apologies.
That's okay. Thank you. I see Alice Angel Green. Is that because now we have a second person from that number? Okay.
Oh, they just put their hand up.
Ken R.
Thank you. Yes, Ken Rutherford from Delray Oaks. And this is just following up on the question previously asked by the resident regarding whether these rules and regulations, I assume they would apply to the flight schools and other people that are leasing hangars there at the airport. And does staff and the board feel this will give them more authority to help us with respect to the pattern flying that sometimes occurs over Delray Oaks? It has improved, but if it does pick up again, would this allow more leverage over them? Because the response typically that we receive when we call and make these complaints for noise and pattern violations that are safety issues is that only the FAA can regulate that. Would this allow the airport staff to have greater control over such things? Thank you very much.
Welcome. Thank you. Just so the public knows, this is not a time for the staff or for us to answer your questions, but your questions will be answered by either Mr. Huber or Mr. Lapierre, so that you will have answers to these. Thank you. And they will come out to you after the meeting. There's no dialogue during this time. Okay, I'm going to open it up to my fellow board members, and if I could start with Director Sani.
Thank you, Chair. Quite a lengthy document, and I'm impressed with just all the work that went into this overall. Can certainly see that there was a lot of time spent and just thinking of all the what ifs. I'm sure there will be things that come up in the future. And I had asked, one of my questions was how changes would be made or handled. And I think Mr. Huber answered that well. I'm curious, how many tenants participated in the 2 meetings that we had? Roughly?
We had 6 on during the evening meeting, which I believe was on the 28th of October. We had 1 on during the daytime meeting, which I believe was on the 3rd of November.
Okay, but everybody has been sent a copy of the presentation, or did they had to be in attendance to get the
No,
presentation?
they did not. We had it posted on our website. We provided notices to 86 different people in groups twice. So they were, and we provided those notices of where the location was, so they could find the document, and also how they could participate in the listening session.
Okay, all right. Thank you for answering my questions.
Sure.
That's all I have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Director Sabo.
Thank you, Chair Leffel. I'm supportive of the minimum standards. They seem rather traditional, but I have a lot of concern about the rules and regulations, and I have about 4 items there. So I'd like to address those and have the response mostly from Scott and possibly from Ken. How would you like me to proceed?
This is your time to cover what your thoughts are on both of these items. So,
okay, first of all, I really think that we ought to be voting on these 2 documents separately. They are significantly different, the rules and regulations versus the minimum standards. So that would be my recommendation, and I'll ask for that later. But one of the primary concerns that I have here is the implementation of the FAA promulgated standards for aeronautical use of the hangars. I don't see that addressed in the rules and regulations. And from the general aviation standpoint, that seems to be have been a major area of concern for us as to what can be in the hangars, what can't be in the hangars other than hazardous materials. And the FAA was rather specific in their issuance of standards for the aeronautical use of the hangars, and it allowed a lot of things and disallowed a lot of things. And I don't see those reflected in here. And I'm specifically referring to Robin Hunt's issuance back in 2016 in the Federal Register. And it was very specific as to what you could do with hangars on aeronautical property. And we don't address those anywhere in here. And I would like to know how we intend to address that. And I have the reference if you need it, Scott. And that question is directed, I guess, at Scott or.
Sure. So I'm happy to take the references from you, Director Sabo. You are correct. We don't have any or very much related to what can be in a hangar. And that's because, as you mentioned, the FAA is quite specific in their in their regulation that they issued. We certainly can add it if it's the pleasure of the board. If it would be, if the board decides it would be beneficial to be in here, we can certainly add that. There's not a problem with that. Happy to do it. That's again, it's at the pleasure of the board. No hesitation in adding it. It's just the idea was we thought it was fairly specific in the Federal Registry and in what was issued by the FAA. But if the airport wants to include that here and be more specific, we can do that. Not a problem.
Okay, thank you, Scott. And I would like to see that in there because in the general aviation community, and I happen to be a general aviation guy, at all airports, this has become quite a controversy as to what you can have in the hangar, what you can do in your hangar, and specifically referencing one of the comments Mark made about the maintenance you can do on your airplane in the hangar. It said minor maintenance. Well,
right.
That is not prohibited by the FAA. It specifically says you can do restorations and major modifications to your airplane. And an example might be if I want to do an engine change on my airplane, that's a major modification. And if I'm a licensed A&P and it's my airplane, I should be able to do that. That's an example of reflecting what the FAA has said in the Federal Register. So I would very much like to see that, because this becomes a source of controversy at every airport where there are general aviation airplanes. And I would like to see us deal with that up front, where it's delineated what we think you can do and what we think you can't do, and being rather specific. And so before we go forward and implement these rules and regulations, I'd like to see that. The other concerns that I have are, other than what you can store in a hangar, or what you can do in your hangar, is the process for dealing with a notice of violation in the rules. Right now, as I read it, and you can correct me, Mike, and you can correct me, Scott, but it leaves the whole appeal process is left up to the discretion of the executive director. There is no reference point to bringing a notice of violation, an appeal of a notice of violation, any further than the executive director, who has the sole discretion to decide who the hearing officer would be, or whether or not what evidence can be provided. And I feel very strongly that we should adopt what the other airports like San Jose International, Santa Clara County have done, where they have an appeal process that goes all the way through the airport commission, and eventually, if it needs to go further, it can go to the Board of Supervisors or the authority running San Jose International. There needs to be an appeal process that is separate and apart from the discretion of the airport staff. And that would be, in our case, that would be the board as the legislative body. Certainly that would be the final straw, and that's not something that would happen regularly, but there needs to be a process in all that. Is that dealt with and I missed it, Scott?
Well, let me, Director Sabo, let me address that for a minute, because I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. The initial, if someone receives a citation and they want to challenge the citation, they can do that in writing and request a hearing before an independent hearing officer. That is someone outside of the airport that would be selected. So it would be a neutral party. Typically, it's another attorney. Usually, doesn't have to be, but it's frequently individuals who volunteer for this kind of service. But there would be a hearing in front of a hearing officer, along with the evidence that's outlined in there in let's see, paragraphs.
Just for a reference, page 52 is where you talk about the notice of violation decisions, and that's 10.3, 8 through 10.
So starting at page 50 is where the hearing officer begins. You can request a hearing in front of the hearing officer. The hearing officer will issue after a hearing and after presenting evidence, the hearing officer will issue a written decision. That written decision can then be appealed to the executive director.
Okay, then what?
Then if they don't agree with that, then their only option is to file an action in court alleging some violation of law.
Okay, well, it was my understanding, and I'm not trying to rewrite the whole document here, but that the executive director has the sole authority to appoint the hearing officer and also determine whether or not he's going to accept the decision of the hearing officer. In the Santa Clara County and San Jose, which is the ones that I looked at, and also in Salinas, there was a procedure for going above to the airport commission and eventually to the city council or the board of supervisors. Why would we not do that? Why would we contain it all internally to the airport without the airport board being the final authority?
You're actually not containing it within the airport. The hearing officer is, while it is appointed by the executive director, it is required to be an outside third party. There are a lot of cases that relate to who can serve as an independent hearing officer. It must be someone who is independent, truly a third party, who has not represented the airport in some fashion. There are several cases from the Supreme Court, and I'm forgetting the name of it. It's Nightlife Partners or something along those lines is part of the name of it. But there are regulations established as to who can serve as a hearing officer. The reason why, I think to get to your question, Director Sabo, the reason why these items usually end with the appeal with the executive director is because most of these are items that are fairly what I will call low level. If there is something related to, let me give you just an example that is not low level. If someone were to drive their car on the runway itself, right? That would be certainly a violation of these rules and regulations. But there would also be a vehicle code backup. So they could be charged criminally with that. With the items that could rise to a level of seriousness, there in every instance there is a statute to back it up where you can choose to go if it really is not a serious incident, you can choose to go the notice of violation route. If it is a serious incident, you can then back it up with the California statutes and file criminal charges in those instances. Let me give you another one. If you were to find a tenant was willfully dumping chemicals into the ground, while that would be a violation of the rules and regulations, that would also be a violation of I don't know how many statutes that there are. That would certainly result in some criminal charges if it was a toxic chemicals that were being dumped. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the level of severity of the incident, this really contemplates, the notice of violation process really contemplates lower level, non-serious, non-life-threatening types of incidents. And so that's why it doesn't, I'll go back to the dog relief area or the pet relief area. If someone violates the pet relief area statute, I don't know that there's some need to go, 4 levels of an appeal all the way to the board of someone who wants to challenge that. But again, this is not you all are the policymakers and you can determine the appellate procedure that you'd like. If you would like to add in a third level appeal from after the executive director to the board, certainly can do that.
Well, and I heard what you said, and I'm talking about administrative decisions, not serious criminal violations. And if in fact, in using my example of I'm changing my engine in my airplane, and I'm an authorized A&P mechanic, that's allowable under the FAA rules. If in fact I get a notice of violation, the airport, the director, whoever the director might be, decides, yeah, I don't agree with the hearing officer, and it ends right there. And we are a legislative body. We are the final legislative body that hears employee appeals and all that. I don't know why we wouldn't do it on this when other airports do. So that's what I'm asking for. Sure. And I heard exactly what you say. I just want to have a process that is a little bit more internal to our airport rather than to force anybody to have to go to court to say, I ought to be able to change the engine on my airplane. The other things that I had, there is a lot of references to airport directives. What are airport directives, and where are those published? Anybody?
Okay. Bill, airport directives are when our operations team or our police direct something that is out of the ordinary, that is different from the norm. Those are directives. Those are not published. Those are notices to tenants that things will change. Example, the discussion about a haul road on airport for construction. We would notice the tenants and give them a directive that this is happening and that they need to be prepared for that, and it may have an impact on their operations. That's a directive. Those are not published. Those are only communicated by situation, only communicated in unusual situations.
Okay, so can I get a notice of violation if an airport directive is violated and I didn't know about it?
For example, if a particular gate is a card gate is not functioning properly, we will notify the tenants, give them a directive to use another gate. If they choose to not adhere to that, then yes, there could be a notice of violation.
Okay, all right. But I guess I understand there's a difference here between air carrier operations and general aviation hangar operations here. So that's the distinction. I'm kind of representing the hangar side of things. So if there was something going on, I would get a notice either, I guess, by email or a notice posted on my hangar or something like that.
Or something even more basic than that, stop by and see you in your hangar and we'll tell you what's going on. There will be communication and a directive. If in the case of the gate incident, we would issue that as a formal directive, please use this other gate. That would require us to then modify the gate cards that everyone has that would be affected. So we'd give them a directive to use a separate alternate gate during that construction period.
Okay, and then finally, since we have not included in our rules and regulations, specifics regarding what you can have in your hangar, what you can't have in your hangar, and that's a big item. I presume that we will kind of feel our way through it. Will we do inspections? How will we enforce what the FAA has mandated to us that we have to do with our hangars, or suffer the potential loss of our grant, our FAA grants under our grant assurances? How will we enforce that? And do we have the right to go in, and are we going to specifically have the right to go and inspect hangars for the purpose of identifying what you have stored in your hangar? And
we have that right already. It's embodied in every lease, and we exercise that right. We do fire inspections. We have recently done contents inspections. We require every hangar to have an operating aircraft housed in it. So that's embodied in the lease. We don't think that it's necessary to recapitulate that or to restate that in this document, because the lease says you will adhere to the rules and regulations, but the lease also articulates specifically what you can and can't do.
Okay, I'm aware of that, and that our leases have been constructed that way without any rules and regulations published and adopted by the board. But this document, this rules and regulations, along with the minimum standards, will be the basis for constructing leases going forward. And at that point, we have to have a reference to what we can do, what that lease can contain and what it can't contain. It can't be arbitrary at the time, dependent on who we're leasing something to. And Scott, am I correct that these rules and regulations, along with minimum standards, will be the basis for constructing leases going forward?
Not necessarily. Every lease that we have incorporates the rules and regulations of the airport, the ordinances of the airport, the FAA regulations, California law, federal law. There are a handful of provisions that are in every single lease. And that's one of them. One of them is it incorporates all of these things. And it even references the rules and regulations and ordinances as may be changed from time to time. It references that they may be changed, and that whatever they're changed to are, in fact, incorporated in the lease.
Okay, so to answer my question rather specifically, and this is important, going forward, we already have leases in place and we probably aren't going to change those. Going forward in the construction of new leases, what is going to be our reference point? Is it the rules and regulations and minimum standards, or is it whatever we feel we'd like to do regarding adherence to lease provisions?
So
what's the part?
It will reference leases going forward as well as previous leases going backwards. They all reference that they are subject to the rules and regulations of the airport.
Okay.
They all do, and they always will.
Okay, and if we don't indicate in the rules and regulations the kind of things you can have in your hangar, yada, 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 all that stuff, what you can do in your hangar, if we don't put that in the rules and regulations, then it becomes a rather arbitrary measure. And that's where, in my opinion, the controversy begins, and we know the situations that have already arisen.
No, so again, Director, the lease itself will articulate and does articulate what you can and can't use your hangar for.
I know, but what is the first document for putting that in the lease? Our rules and regulations?
No, it's actually the FAA regulations. Every lease also, in addition to rules and regulations, it also incorporates the FAA regulations. And what we're saying by not including anything related to hangar usage in this document, what we're saying is that we agree and we're accepting the limits that the FAA has set, and we're not being any more strict than that. Most airports, when they want to add to the restrictions, the FAA sort of sets the baseline threshold. These are the things that we say you can and cannot do. Airports can be more restrictive if they want to. But what we're saying by not include anything in here is that we're willing to go along with exactly the limit that the FAA has set and nothing more. And the FAA regulation is, I think, quite specific as to what can be done in a hangar, and what activities are acceptable, and on the flip side, what activities are not acceptable. And so that the FAA rules and regulations are incorporated into every lease that the airport has.
Okay, I understand that, and I will oppose this rules and regulations simply because we are rather non-specific. It allows for a lot of latitude as to what we put in our leases and what we don't put in our leases, and it requires that the tenant, the lessee, become an expert in FAA rules and regulations, because we didn't even want to put them in our rules and regulations. And I think based upon the experiences that I saw at other airports, that they are rather specific in their rules and regulations about what you can do with your hangar, particularly GA hangars. I don't have a problem with the commercial operators, but the GA hangars and the GA tenants, I think are going to be put seriously at risk here without sufficient knowledge. And everything is governed by the FAA. We know that, but to make it part of our rules and regulations, I think is important, and I will lobby for that. Thank you. There was one other minor thing. We talked about enplaning airplanes, enplaning and deplaning passengers from an airplane. It seemed like the words were mainly oriented towards the air carrier ramp out there. You know, that if you want to deplane your passengers, you have to shut your engines down. Does that apply also, Mike, to the general aviation area, where it's prohibited for you to let passengers out of your airplane or board them with your engine running? there's been a lot of accidents in that regard.
Yeah, and it would, Director, absolutely.
Okay.
The rules and regulations and the minimum standards are designed to provide that broad brush look at what what the operator's responsibilities are, one of which this board has always had safety as a preeminent issue for us. And you know, as well as everyone, as well as anyone, that deplaning a passenger with an aircraft engine running is a very, very unsafe operation.
Well, it is, and common sense would dictate that. Unfortunately, a lot of people are getting their hands, arms, and legs chopped off
Right.
with unsafe operations. What I'm referring to is page 36.4, which talks to the air carrier ramp only. It doesn't seem to apply to general aviation activities elsewhere on the airport, and I think it should. You know, if it's observed that are doing that, they need to have a notice of violation.
We can look at that and make sure that the language addresses that. If it doesn't, then we can offer up an amendment.
Okay.
But it is the intent that it does apply.
All right. And Chair Leffel, I really think we should bifurcate this particular item into the minimum standards and a separate vote on the rules and regulations. And Mark, in his presentation, referred to the timeline here for passage of an ordinance. Was that just a misstatement? Are we passing a resolution or an ordinance today?
No, we're doing both, and the ordinance is a pass, and then we would bring it back next month for a pass to print. So you get an extra 30 days on the ordinance.
Okay, so we are voting an ordinance regarding the rules and regulations and an ordinance regarding the minimum standards. Is that correct?
No. So the resolution is for the minimum standards and the rules and regulations. The ordinance is to rescind a previous ordinance that dealt with many of the issues that are now going to be adopted in the rules and regulations.
Okay, so the ordinance only applies to the rescinding of the previous ordinance.
That's correct.
Are we incorporating all those things that are in the previous ordinance, like you can't have sex on the airport or something like that, or you can't spit? Are we incorporating that by implication, or are we being specific in the new rules and regulations?
We're incorporating the things that we believe need to be incorporated. I will tell you, we're not incorporating every single thing. You referenced, spitting. I know that was in the ordinance. I'm not sure that's a major problem that needs to be addressed in the rules and regulations, but in the event that it becomes one, we can certainly add it back in.
Okay, well, I just noticed that there were several items in the previous ordinance that dealt with the normal care of the terminal down there, and the previous board thought that was important, so I was curious about how we were going to handle those kind of mundane items in the terminal going forward. And because people can get a notice of violation here if they insist on doing it, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm done. Thank you, Chair Leffel.
Thank you. Director Miller.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. It was good, and you already answered some of the questions I had. I do have, I guess it's more of a concern. During the presentation by Ken, there was a reference to infractions made a lot. As you know, an infraction is a criminal offense. It's one you can't go to jail for. Do we reference our rules and regulations as infractions?
I think, Director, that Ken was using infractions as violations and vice versa. So
okay.
I think that may have been I don't want to say a misstatement on his part, but these will be violations, not infractions.
Okay, so we don't use And I know we looked over this in lease, but I don't remember seeing the word infraction. If it did, it didn't jump out at me at that time.
No.
Yeah.
And just, and again, just, you know, my concern that we do some education for our police officers.
Yes.
So they don't think that they're dealing with criminal offenses. Someone refuses to, and they try to handle as a criminal offense. And
Yeah. And we will certainly do that.
okay, thank you. That's all I have.
All right, Director Crucio.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of my most important questions have been answered. I did very much have the same concerns as Director Sabo about the discussion with the executive director on interpretation, et cetera. I don't want to beat this to death, but I do have one additional question on this authority of the executive director. If you go to Rules and Regulations, Article 2, the last portion, the executive director has full authority to interpret rules, directives, and emergency procedures in the event they may be deemed ambiguous. My question is, are we talking, I'm assuming we're not talking about as these violations occur. Is that accurate? Are we not, does this not refer to after the fact?
Gary, can you say the number again?
Section 2.3.
Thank you.
The Rules and Regulations, Article 2, last item.
Yeah, my understanding of that, Gary, and the way that I would interpret that, the way that I have interpreted that is if there is a question of clarity regarding one of the rules and regulations, and someone feels as though it's ambiguous, it would fall upon me to interpret what we were trying to say as a body in that effort. Does that make sense?
No, that's not answering the question. My question is on the spot that this, I mean, I can't conceive how you would be able to come to every issue that might arise.
No. This would be after the fact.
Okay. That answers the question.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Just a couple more. So Rules and Regulations, Article 7, motor vehicles. Grants airport staff inspection authority of vehicles and equipment within the AOA. Can I get a little more clarification on that? Is that would not be actually referring to aircraft, would it?
No, these are vehicles. In our language, we don't call an aircraft a vehicle, although in some other instances it is. These would be the tugs, the belt loaders, the de-icing units, the fuel trucks. Those we already do inspect. And this is just codifying that inspection requirement. We're required to do those inspections under Part 139 of the FAA code. So we do those inspections already. This just codifies it.
Got it. Okay. Just a comment on Rules and Regulations, Article 8, religious, charitable, and political activities. I'm a little confused as to why we would ever even consider allowing leafletting or solicitation. So can I get clarification on that?
Sure. The First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution requires it.
It's a good answer. Okay, Article 10, Rules and Regulations. How will these various fines be collected? So let's see someone gets a citation.
Mm-hmm.
What is the mechanism for enforcing collection of these fines?
Mechanism would be first issuance of the notice with the fine provision attached. So they would be required to pay that, just as they are currently required to pay some of our other fees, such as the fees associated with building permits. If they chose to not pay that, then the next steps would be what are outlined, which would be an enforcement action against the tenant. And that could be, for example, if you're given a notice of violation, you just say, I'm not going to pay that, and you have an access card. We can turn off your access card. So there would be next steps for us internally to force compliance.
Yeah, and Director Crucio, the most logical place for these steps to be, you'll notice there's nothing that talks about collection of fines or anything in here. And the reason why is the most logical place for those to be will be in the annual adoption of
our rates and charges.
Rates and, that's the word I was looking for, the rates and charges. We can certainly outline the steps there. But I can tell you, no one is going to be taking, substantive legal measures to try and collect the fine. Fines that, and I'll just use a round number, $100 fine that someone disputes. Well, we may, if it's a tenant, we may be able to say, okay, we're going to restrict your access on the airport. If someone refuses to pay it, it'll just be on the books, and it'll, at a certain point in time, we'll have to figure out what to do there. But that'll be outlined in the rates and charges.
Yeah, and our current practices with all of our hangar leases, for example, are month-to-month leases. And if we had a violation and we could not resolve that violation and the tenant refused to pay, we have the ability, because it's a month-to-month lease, to ask them to leave the airport and vacate the hangar. That's the kind of compliance vehicle that we have available to us currently and always have. Not saying that we.
Thank you. Madam Chair, do you want questions now on minimum standards or not? Is that for another?
No, this is your time on all of this.
No one has asked any questions on, I don't believe, on minimum standards. Is that correct? Anyway, it doesn't matter. If it's now's the time, I've just got a couple of real quick items. One's very minor. I believe on minimum standards, there is a typo. I guess it's 16. It says, how does minimum standards affect me? I believe it should be, how do minimum standards affect me?
Page 16?
Is that in the presentation, Director?
Presentation.
Yeah.
In the presentation? Apologize for that. That document is really not part of the adoption, but we can make that correction.
Okay, one other question on minimum standards. It's numbered on my paper here as number 19. And my question is, how will these permitting fees be determined?
They're going to be determined by the board. We're going to, as we do with all of our rates and charges, we'll put forward to the board for your consideration during budget what the fines and fees would be. The board would have the right to then examine those, discuss those, and adopt those or reject those.
And those fees might vary, correct?
They would. Our goal here is not to make it a revenue generating exercise, but to make it punitive enough that they carry some teeth and to be consistent with what industry practice is.
Okay. So Director Crucio, the general rule on fees and charges is this. It's as the director mentioned, it is intended to be a revenue neutral cost recovery measure. So you look at what is the reasonable approximation of providing that service to the airport. And that would be for example, a permit fee, you would look at, okay, what are the charges that the airport is going to incur in reviewing the documentation, approving a permit. That's how you set the charge. The fee needs to reasonably approximate the service. In the same way, a fine is for non-compliance. There's a similar component, although there's also the recognition that it's impossible to set a number that would equate the violation itself, and the court has generally established fines under $1,000 are acceptable generally, but there's broad latitude as far as fines go. But it is, again, it's not intended to be a revenue generating measure. It's intended to ensure compliance, and if someone doesn't comply, it's intended for them to only not comply once. So they say, I don't want to do that again because I don't have to pay that fine again.
Lastly, I just want to thank the staff for the hard work on this. This is not a task that can be done in a day or two, and we really appreciate all the effort put in by the staff on these documents. And Madam Chair, that's all I have.
Thank you. I've got a few. How do we onboard employees with these? Anybody? So if someone gets hired by Envoy or somebody, how do they know that these are in place?
That is the responsibility of their employer. So we make sure that Envoy, for example, has those and understands that they need to inform their employee of the contents of the rules and regulations.
Okay, so for instance, right now we have a new airport operator, and he's never been on an airport other than getting on a plane and off a plane before.
Yep.
And he's got a lot of employees. So how do you give a class for all of
We
them
do.
that they know?
Yeah, we do. We take the principles of each of the organizations and we'll educate them on the rules and regulations as we've done with the rest of our tenants. And then it will be incumbent upon them to educate their employees. We're always available to answer questions or provide additional information, but we make it incumbent upon the employer to educate the employee rather than us doing that for everyone. And that's consistent with how we do other things as well. That the security provisions that we have in place, that's the responsibility of the employer, not us, to educate their employees. So we provide the education, kind of a train the trainer kind of an environment where we'll train someone to understand, to be able to articulate, to be able to train, and then they'll be responsible for educating their people.
Okay, one of the things that came up, and I have obviously reviewed these as we were going along, but there's nothing, we didn't put anything, I don't think, about mask requirements or viruses or anything like that. And I know it's a special right now, but it also could be something that is more ongoing.
We could certainly add that. I think the idea behind this, while they are both living documents and will come back to the board on occasion for amendment, is in every provision, in every lease, we say that the board, that you will adhere to the rules and regulations as adopted by the board and amended from time to time. So if the board chooses to put a mask requirement on its own, over and above what the state is already doing, we could do that, and by virtue of that language, we could then enforce compliance.
Another avenue for compliance could be a simple airport directive. There is in the use of the definitions airport directives, based on certain circumstances, the executive director can issue a directive, or airport personnel can issue a directive saying, temporarily, this is a rule that's going forward, and they posted it on all the entrances saying, to come inside, you must have a mask on. So that's certainly a possibility. And to be quite honest, in the event that the board at some point wants to, add it to the rules and regulations, you can certainly do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
Well, I mean, I'm just kind of thinking, we have signs posted, we have that. So does that cover us?
Yes.
But also, does it cover then for our tenants who maybe are on the north side to be in compliance because they're actually on airport property? I was thinking more like our whole global piece, not just our terminal.
Sure. In that one case, that's a state mandate. So regardless of where you're at, you would be required to wear these. And if in fact the board chose to do something different, you wanted everybody to wear purple shoes, and you said purple shoes are a requirement to do business on the airport or to be on airport property, that's something that you'd have to put into your rules and regulations, because that.
Not that I recommend purple shoes.
Not that I recommend purple shoes. They often flash.
Well, I don't know,
Yeah.
this is,
Yeah.
I think something's gonna be with us for
Yeah.
a while.
Well.
And I don't know how do we have anything in here that from time to time there's a need for requirements?
No, again, other than the airport directive feature that is in here, let me maybe suggest, if you look at the hierarchy of statutes and regulations, you've got federal, state, county, and then airport ordinances and then rules and regulations. The county certainly has authority, even though it's airport property, the county certainly has authority to enforce the mask regulations right now under the governor's executive order. That's not going to end anytime soon. So even if we didn't have anything, the county could still enforce it, through the authority of the public health officer. So, that's there are some options there. Perhaps maybe what we do is we are following the county regulations. We are following the state law right now. We've got signs posted all around the airport. If this is something that the board believes is going to be around for a while, we can certainly add something into this.
I don't know, I was just sitting here kind of musing
Sure.
through it. I mean, obviously, we've had vaping for some time and we still have people who break that as soon as they feel like it. And we have never fined them. And maybe we need to start start making a
Possible. Sure.
stand on it. Because that was the other thing. I'm reading this and I'm like, how are we doing this? How do we find somebody? Ken said something about 3 strikes. What's that?
Yeah, that's in the security program. 3 strikes. You get 2 strikes before you are fined.
What, a badge security?
Yeah.
Okay, so when they hit the doors,
That relates to
they open
badges,
the doors
Yeah,
and do that. Okay, that's
that
the 3
related to the
strikes.
badges, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we've got some people who have way over strikes on some things.
Yeah.
And then on the rules and regulations, I'm on Ken's presentation, on slide number 9, Article 6. So, following airport-wide directives, blah, blah. We had a guy who was I believe, an FAA tower employee. You all seem to know him, Eric. Every time we would have a complaint from somebody, it would be, oh, it's Eric. You talk to him. I assume you talked to his boss, and he continued to just do whatever he wanted down that runway. Now, why didn't we send him a thing and tell him you are no longer allowed to fly here?
We don't have the authority to do that. We do not have the authority to tell a user of the airport they cannot use the airport. We're a public agency. We accept federal funds. The federal government does not allow us to prohibit that kind of use. Our vehicle can be related to the lease that they have on airport. So we can, even the sublease, we can take action against the lessee for non-compliance with operating standards and provisions. So
Let me see if I can.
Airport operations prohibited due to unsafe use.
Yeah, that's
So when he's too
anything on
low
the
to the
ground.
runway, or he's like buzzing the tower and doing his little wiggle waggle with his wings, is that unsafe, or is that just being a cute little guy?
Could be both, but that provision is not designed to address things off ground. It's designed to address things only on ground, because that's our purview. Above ground, in the air, is not ours.
So we have no teeth really,
That's
at
correct.
all.
That's correct.
That's
is what you're
correct.
saying.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Okay, which I think the people from Delray Oaks need to hear. We have
Yeah,
absolutely
you're right.
no authority
Mhm.
The
to stop bad behavior once they leave the ground.
No,
The FAA has, and they're very specific about this, they have occupied the field of regulation in the air. We are not able to regulate or prohibit behavior in the air of any aircraft because the FAA has completely occupied the field.
So how do we? Do you just keep complaining to FAA and they take
We
the
do.
guy's license? Is
Yeah.
that what the,
but they
is that
can
the
take,
penalty?
yeah, they can take compliance action against a pilot. We can report. That's the extent of what we can do, is report in the event that there is an unsafe condition and we know the operator, we can report that to FSDO, as can anyone else.
And I'm guessing there's a difference between an annoying behavior and an unsafe behavior.
There is.
Correct?
Yes.
There is.
So.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just
Mhm.
trying to
Yeah.
clarify this, because
Sure.
I think this is a crux of what also annoys the neighbors, and I get it. And it's always kind of interesting to me, it's like, oh, it's Eric and he's being bad again, but you know, it's
Yeah.
like, how many times can you send somebody to the corner and there are no consequences?
Yeah, that's very true.
So, okay.
I will say this, that for continual complaints to the FSDO stands for Field Safety.
Flight Standards District.
Flight Standards District Office. I always forget that. Every time someone complains there, they will follow up. And eventually pilots will get tired of having FSDO continually calling them to ask them about some activity that it will get them to stop the activity eventually. Just because they will follow up.
Okay,
So yeah, complaints to FSDO is the place for that behavior to get, that's where that
but
behavior gets
it's one
reported.
pilot continually
Yep.
doing something.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it has nothing to do with flight schools, they have multiple trainees and all of that. It's one pilot over and over who just continues to flaunt
That's correct.
whatever they can do.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, so the Monterey Security Strike Program, that's the one you're talking about with badges?
Correct. Yeah, that's related to the security program. Yes.
Okay. So on slide number 19, under minimum standards, Article 2, which is page 10 of that document. It says Monterey staff will revisit existing leases and agreements to ensure minimum standards are adequately represented. So
Yeah, that's probably slightly poorly worded. We're not going to revisit every lease because the board's actions as indicated in the lease say as adopted from time to time. So the rules and regulation language is already there, and minimum standards can be comported as part of rules and regulations. So that's probably a misstatement, but going forward, we might likely work with Scott to change some of the language to be more articulate about rules and regulations and minimum standards.
okay, because I was like, wow, what's the timing that we're gonna pull every lease and who's gonna do this and what kind of timeline are we putting on this? So,
Sure.
so this is not a good,
It's
it's a bad presentation on here.
Yeah, it probably could have been worded slightly differently to be a little bit more clear.
Okay. Sorry, I have to read my notes.
It's fine.
Okay, so on page 13 of the presentation, slide 25, under the policy document rollout timeline.
Mhm.
So so we need, I would think, just in looking at timeline, we also need then to put a place in here that we're gonna look at rates, fees and charges in budget, because that's part of this.
And we certainly can do that. I think that was the attempt in the final bullet point there. Annual fiscal year rates and charges schedule will incorporate penalties and fees beginning July 1.
Okay,
Which
and
is-
I do have it, I did insert a July 1, not July 2021, because it is July 1st
That's
that
correct.
it would go into,
Yeah.
but we have to, the board has to make the determination
Correct.
prior to that.
Yes.
And that's not covered in anything in here.
Yeah, I think it was implied there if you want to, and again, this was a presentation. It's not part of the document itself, but it is the intent of staff to put forward as part of the budget process, which must happen by July 1. As part of the budget process, the rules or the rates and charges schedule, which would incorporate the fine and fee structure.
Okay. With what Director Sabo was requesting to break it down with the difference between minimum, the rates and standards and the rules and regulations, do we run into an issue if we divide that vote?
Because of the way that this was formatted, I formatted it with one resolution for both of them. So the short answer is yes. I could, draft a separate resolution, but again, you're looking at I would need 15 minutes or so to do that.
Okay. And I also have to say, I did agree with the comments on the appeal after the ED to the board. And the reason I do is because I heard you, unless I misunderstood you, Mr. Hubert, was that from whatever the executive director would decide, then if someone wanted to take us to court, they could take us to court. And it seems like there should be an opportunity for the board to try to mitigate that in any way, or to be understanding that it's their decision that we're going to court instead of staff's decision that we're going to court.
And again, I can plug in language if that's the desire of the board.
Well, I didn't think about it until I started thinking about, hey, it's just like from the executive director and having a bad day and straight to court. And I'm like, oh, maybe not.
I never have a bad day.
So I don't know. I kind of think that is maybe an important piece, that there should be one more step in there because this is the governing body of the airport.
Yeah, I would have no objection to that.
So
it's fine. I just understand that it would be rare that it would come.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
yeah,
can't even imagine that it would, but
right.
I've been here 12 years and I haven't seen us go to court on any of these, but
Sure.
I do believe that it maybe should be a step in there.
If
I
it's one
don't
more
think I've
step.
ever worked for anybody that didn't have an appeal process to whoever the highest body was within that group before it went outside.
Mhm.
And then what kind of third party do you choose for a hearing like this?
I can tell you how I would approach it. I would approach it as either the general manager of a business on airport that has no interest in the issue, or I would look at outside counsel to be able to mitigate or to be able to arbitrate. So that's where I would go to find that body.
There are actually outside counsel who do nothing but this. They do nothing. They do this. I call it administrative hearing for hire. I mean, that's what they do. They're hearing officers for hire.
It's always nice to second guess people. I like that. Okay, and then the piece of the aeronautical use of the hangars, and I heard you say that it's dictated by the federal rules and regulations, so it's not broken down
Correct.
in here.
Correct.
But it seems like that's where we've had an issue with the video people and what do you call them, shade tree mechanics
Mhm.
and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So should we put a section in here
Mm-hmm.
that we at least talk about
We
their
certainly,
nautical use?
we certainly can.
Yeah.
What I would suggest if it's the pleasure of the board to add in a appeal to, to the governing body, what I would suggest is pass what we have now so we can get this in force and get it in place, and then direct us to come back next month or with modifications to the areas that you would like modified, and we'll go ahead and do that.
Mhm. Yeah, and I just want to point out that if you are a licensed mechanic and you are maintaining your own airplane, we have no objection to that. The FAA allows you to do that. That is their responsibility to ensure that you are a licensed mechanic, not ours. If you're working on your own airplane and you've got an A&P certificate approved by FAA, you can do whatever you want to that airplane. It will not stop you. The intent behind this is exactly what you said earlier, the shade tree mechanic that's on airport. We don't have insurance provisions. We don't even know they're here. We don't even know that they're licensed and they're offering their services. If, for instance, something happens to the aircraft that they're working on and there's an unfortunate incident, we would be potentially open to some lawsuit if we didn't have this provision in there because we allowed it to happen on our airport.
So it seems like it might be important to note that we have a section in here that we.
Yeah, and and I think what we were trying to do in this was avoid regurgitation of the entirety of the regulation, but we can certainly cite that.
I think if we had some bullet points and then direct them to the whole federal regulation.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. We can certainly do that. I will say the part I think that you're referencing about the shade tree mechanics under the minimum standards, that has everything that we would need to either get them to stop, to enforce, that's already in there.
That's in there.
If they're operating out of their own hangar as a mechanic on the side, like, hey, sure, bring your plane over, I'll do an oil change on it or what have you. I think we do have plenty there in the minimum standards to enforce against that. But I think what Director Sabo was referring to, and I'm going to just go to the extreme for a minute, what people call the man cave or the pilot cave, where you have, a big screen TV and a bar and a couch and, and aviation is sort of like a secondary use, we can certainly include, we can incorporate the FAA's regulations, add in some that we think are necessary and direct them to the FAA regulation for the full, list of items that are acceptable. We can certainly do that.
Okay.
So there are two options. That if the board would like some changes to this, there are two options. You can direct us to make those changes, bring it back in full. So you table it for now, tell us, come back with these changes in these areas, we can do that. And then I could draft a resolution to split the two. So have a resolution for the minimum standards and one for rules and regs. Or you can pass it now if that's the pleasure of the board and direct us to come back with modifications to it. Up to you.
Personally, I'd just rather that we got it done the way we want it and then we do it, we vote on it at once and not have to look at it now and look at it again.
Table it, we'll take what you've given us and we'll go back and massage it and bring it back next month.
Pleasure of the board. The question I'm going to ask you right now is, do you want to vote on these today or do you want to ask for the changes and then they will come back next month for a vote only on the changes? We're not going to go through the whole thing again. So whatever we get from Mr. Huber will have the red lines on it where you can see what the changes are. And then that's what we will vote on next month is the additions or changes that we have brought up today. And I would like to ask Director Sabo, since he is the pilot on the board, to work with Mr. Huber on what he was requesting on the hangar usage, since I'm out of my league on that. I know you shouldn't have videos and parties and things like that, but I don't know what kind of airplane activity you could have. So I would leave that to the pilot among us. And then if we could add a section on the appeals process, that there would also be, if there is no resolution with the executive director, that it would come to the full board before it would go further. And so use of hangars, appeal process, and I think that answered the rest of mine. And I think I captured Director Sabo's. So Director Sani, do you have anything you'd like to add that you'd like to see come back on this before we take a vote?
No, I'm good with those changes.
Okay. Director Sabo?
I'm a little unclear, Marianne, on what you were proposing. Were we talking about voting on both of these things today or bifurcating them?
We are talking about the staff will make the changes that we're talking about, and they will be bifurcated for a vote for next month. And we will vote on the rules and regulations, minimum standards in 1-2 vote, in one resolution, 2 resolutions.
One for each.
One for each, and then one ordinance.
Yes.
Rescission and adoption.
And I think
Okay,
I heard
I
you correctly.
concur with that. I had prepared some amendments to the rules and regulations. And so I guess what you're also suggesting is that offline, that I work with Scott before we vote on the minimum standards and on the rules and regulations
That is correct. If you would please submit them to Mr. Huber. That was actually the intent when these were circulated to the board a couple weeks ago, was that if you had some changes that you could actually submit them and talk to him and Mr. Leffel about them. So I'm sorry that you didn't understand that, because we probably could have had some of this worked out. But if you will go ahead and submit them, and then it will come back to the lease committee in December before it comes to the board. So you need to get the things in now. The lease committee then will review them with having both Mr. Leffel and Mr. Huber with us. And then we'll bring it back to the full board for a vote in December. So the ordinance will not go for a pass to print until January.
Okay, as I understand it, then I will work with both Scott and I guess Mike on the proposals that I have for changes regarding the rules and regulations, and the vote will occur separately on the minimum standards and separately on the rules and regulations in December at December's meeting. Am I stating that correctly?
I think you finally understand it. I'm happy.
Well, yeah, thank you for bearing with me. I'm an old person, and sometimes I don't always get it, so I think if I stated that correctly, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And it'll be in the minutes of the meeting, so you can go back and refresh your memory if you need to. Director Miller?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Though the only purpose for the ordinance is to repeal the ordinances that are in conflict. Couldn't we do that today, and that way next month everything will be set to go?
It's your pleasure. It's up to you.
Because if we vote to repeal, it's not repealed until we have our second meeting. So it's not like we're suspending any ordinances right now, correct?
It's true.
Yeah, I would be okay with that, to get it so that we get it wrapped up.
Oh, so what if we have a whole rash of spitting between now and the next meeting? we don't have any way to prohibit it. So, no, I'm just,
Well, you actually would, because the ordinance that you'd be voting on today would have to be printed in the newspaper and come back for a second hearing before it would be in effect.
No, we can always add spitting. Okay, so when we do a motion, then we're going to ask for we'll ask for the vote today on the ordinance, but we will bifurcate the other two items for resolutions in December. So, Director Curcio?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so could I have a motion to move the resolution piece of this to the December meeting, and that we will have two resolutions coming back in December for both, one for the rules and regulations and one for the minimum standards.
I second that. Sabo.
I don't believe it's been moved.
I haven't, I was just proposing an amendment. Would someone like to make the amendment?
I so moved.
Director Sabo?
Carl Miller, second.
And Miller, second. Okay. Any other discussion on that item? Director Sabo, you still have your hand up.
Oh, I'll take it down.
Thank you. I'm old right behind you. You'll confuse me. Okay. Amanda, would you do a roll call, please?
Director Sani,
Aye.
Director Curcio,
Yes.
Director Sabo,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Chair Leffel.
Yes, thank you. So then the second one would be, I would entertain a motion on ordinance number 927, an ordinance of the Monterey Peninsula Airport District repealing ordinance number 796.
So moved.
Second by Miller.
Director Curcio is first and Director Miller is the second. Any other discussion on that? Okay, Amanda, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Director Sani,
Yes.
Director Curcio,
Yes.
Director Sabo,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Chair Leffel.
Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you all very much. So now we have Mr. Gray.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
can we take 5?
Yes. Could we, yeah, go ahead. We'll take 5. It's 11:27, so we'll be back at 11:35. You get 8.
Hey, Mary Ann, I think Mr. Gray departed. Somebody needs to call him if we're going to hear from him again.
Well, he's still on my participants list.
Yes.
Oh, yeah?
Yep.
Oh, okay. All right.
Sorry, Mr. Gray. We need 8 minutes.
We'll comfort Greg.
Director Sabo, are you really there or is that just a shot?
Mary Ann, I really am here.
Okay, well, I can't tell if I have a quorum. That's the problem. So, okay.
Oh, yeah, I'm here. You know, I
Okay.
just don't look pretty on this stuff, you know, and
Okay.
I like the glam shot better.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call us back into session. It's 11:36. And our item on the agenda is a presentation of the future of the Navy Flying Club by the Navy Flying Club representative, Mr. Keith Gray. So Mr. Gray, thank you for joining us, and we're happy to have you here. Go ahead.
I guess I need to be unmuted there. Hopefully.
I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Anyway, I'm not asking for any decisions by the board today. I just wanted to kind of give you an update what's going on with us. I'm the president of the Monterey Flying Club Auxiliary, which was formed previous to COVID days. We were stood up to be a financial support activity to be able to take donations outside of the Navy and to transition those funds to the club. Unfortunately, COVID happened, and we have been caught into kind of a catch-22 situation where the Navy won't let us fly with instructors because of COVID, which is our biggest revenue generator. And so and because of that, there's been a decision pretty much kind of made to transition us back into private existence, which occurred actually probably about 15 years ago. And we were a separate entity before going under MWR. And I don't want to get into the Navy politics because it's kind of complicated to some degree. But in any event, we've been adopted with a partnership with the MPS Foundation, who is going to be our sponsor, so to speak. So they are also a 501c3, which is the same thing with the auxiliary. We're both nonprofit organizations. So the flying club, the Navy Flying Club, is not closing. We're just going to transition to operations under the MPS Foundation. And so there's still a lot of things that we're working. We're all volunteers. None of us are paid. I happen to be a retired federal employee. Just a quick background, 40 years plus being an Army officer, and also I retired as a GS-14 with the government service. Many jobs, pardon my allergies. Anyway, I've had many duties with the federal government. So I'm kind of versed in federal regulations, and personally a pilot since 1974. And a Navy Flying Club member since 1983. So anyway, I just wanted to open the discussion and to work with Mr. Lapierre to convey that we're still going to be in operation, and there's still a lot of unanswered questions on both sides of the fence, ours and I'm sure on the airport side. So we're, with part of the transitions, we'll be able to open up our training back up as well. And currently we've got about 60 members, and and our clientele primarily is the DLI and the MPS folks who come in to train over there and with the Civil Air Patrol. So that's kind of who we're, I'm not sure how versed you are in our organization. So basically I just wanted to open the discussion today and answer any questions that you guys might have. And then our proposal too is I would like to hopefully meet back with you folks and after working with Mr. Lapierre in December to kind of go over, hopefully we have some more information to provide to the board. And one thing is we know we got to transition our insurance, and that's part of we've already talked to the MPS Foundation about that, and they're working on that. So, and also, and I apologize for being kind of in the, for not conveying with Mike last week. I had a stomach issue that came up. So I would just like to also say, we would like to stay where we're at. And there's still some questions with the Navy on the ownership of the trailer and the hangar and the fuel tank. But all those facilities over on the north side were paid for by the Flying Club members over the years, I should say. Even those facilities are technically under the Navy's property book. And part of the process that we're looking at trying to do, at least I am, is there is a way for nonprofits like us to actually get those properties transferred to the nonprofit. So and we're currently under a lease with the airport. We want to retain that land lease with the airport as long as that's executable. And so with that, I pretty much, let's see, I'm trying to go over something. I know Rich Peterson also sent a letter to the airport advising that the club is now going to be flying under the MPS Foundation. That transition date has not been set firmly yet. We're still under MWR to some degree, and we're all non-paid volunteers. So I just kind of wanted to open that up with you folks, and I appreciate your time. And we're also a Part 61, which some of the board members may not understand, but that makes us, those are the rules that we follow under the FAA. So we follow the FAA rules for the training, the insurance. And the north side of the field over there allows us and the other general aviation pilots are there to utilize the runway 28 left, or correction, 28 right, and 10 left, to be able to stay out of the commercial traffic. So it saves us about 30 minutes or so from having, if we were over where aerodynamic side of the field, that would adds about 30 minutes actually to the flight time. So anyway, so I'll just answer any questions that I can. I don't have a lot of answers today, but we're still working through a lot of issues.
Okay, well, thank you for the update. And I'll open it up to the public if they have any questions on this item or comments.
Yeah, I may not have all the answers for everybody, but I'll be glad to take them down and work with Mr. Leffel in the coming weeks and try to come up with a better game plan.
Okay, I see nothing coming from the public. I'll close public comment, bring it back to the board. And Director Curcio, could I start with you, please?
Yeah, I have no questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Director Miller?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Sabo?
Thank you, Chair Leffel. Keith, thank you for coming and kind of updating us on what's going on with the Navy Flying Club. They've been with us for 30 years, and I know a lot of pilots have been trained out of that facility. The question that I have, Keith, is once you get things sorted out with MWR, what is it you want from the airport? And I'm speaking to the fuel tank that you have over there, the hangar, and the dirt that you are occupying over there, which you have previously leased from the airport. I don't think you have a current lease with the airport. I think that's expired. What is it that you would like the airport to do to support you if we were choosing to do that?
What our proposal is, thank you, Bill Sabo, sir, is we'd like to stay where we're at currently and extend a land lease with the airport. Part of our business plan is, and this was prior to COVID, we were moving forward with a pretty good aggressive business plan that we've developed in the last couple of years. We had 3 aircraft in the inventory, and one of those aircraft now has transitioned to private hands. So we're going to do a lease back with that owner. And then we also have about 2 other owners that have stepped forward and 1 potential owner that has stepped forward to do a lease back and join our club and help give us additional revenue. 2 of the aircraft that we have belong technically to the Navy. And there's a lot of questions on those 2 aircraft right now. We may lose those aircraft. And if that happens, then we've got a lease back from the private owners who will provide resources to us as a club. Definitely we have 1 aircraft, a Warrior right now. The fuel tank as well was paid for with the members' the monies over the years, dues and etc. And so the club actually paid for those facilities. The trailer was relocated from Moffett Field. And by the way, we just put in about $10,000 worth of improvements into the trailer. It may not look like it on the outside, but we paid in the inside. We have new carpet. We put a new roof on it, and we made some upgrades to our computer systems. And this was prior to the COVID and a little bit during the COVID because we had a break. So all the members came together and we donated our time and resources and to fix up the trailer to make it more presentable. And so we've been acting on that note. We've been kind of acting like a open we open our doors to everybody that's parked on that side, whether they're a member or not. So we kind of provide restroom facilities, a lounge to pilots who are visiting. And we've, so anyone who flies in who decides to park on that side of the airfield, we've provided those services to them. And part of our business plan was with 3 aircraft, we were looking to hire either a full-time or a part-time aircraft mechanic to help take care of our aircraft. Because right now we were flying to Watsonville because that's who had the contract for maintenance on the aircraft. Now that I understand there's a A&P on the airfield, we can probably talk to that gentleman and use his services. And one note is that owner operators or pilots who own their aircraft are authorized by the FAA to do certain things like oil changes and et cetera with the oversight of an A&P who signs off on the work. So that's why the hangar would still be a benefit to us as well. And definitely the trailer. Now, fuel tank is part of our business plan originally because we're able to buy the fuel at a wholesale price and then sell it back to the club members and use it in our aircraft on a retail, on a wholesale. And what the club is totally nonprofit. It always has been. So, but our goal has always been to provide flight services and training at the lowest cost possible. And right now with the CFI and the aircraft rental, we're doing that for about $130 an hour. So we provide that. So that what it allows us to do is to lower enlisted people and folks to be able to access flight training and have those. There's a lot of people at DLI and MPS like to come over for lunchtime and fly out of Monterey and do a quick hour. They'll have a 2-hour break or whatever. They're able to fly in, or correction, drive over and then do their flights and come back and go back to school, which makes it very convenient being on the north side of the building. So our desire, that's our long-term goal, is to retain those facilities. It's up in the air how, unfortunately, the downside is that Navy MWR, which is a government activity, if you will, has title to those facilities. So I proposed to them a few weeks ago that they transfer them to us, but that's still a question mark at this point.
So if I could just, Chair Leffel, if I could just have a follow-up question with them. So it's your desire that if you can wrest control of those assets, the hangar, the trailer, the tank, from the Navy and put it into your nonprofit, you want to establish a new lease on that same plot of land over there and continue pretty much as you have been in the past, just under your nonprofit. Have you considered what our master plan calls for regarding that area over there?
I have, sir, Bill. One of my previous jobs was a director of public works for the Army. So I'm fairly versed on master plans, and I used to be a master planner for them. So, and I have reviewed your documents several times, and I haven't seen the latest iteration, anything that affected the club's location, unless there's something that's changed that I missed. But I believe we fit very well with that master plan, because all the general aviation assets will be, the plan is to move them over there, and we plan on staying as a general aviation school. And there's another course of action which might possibly happen, is that MWR decides to abandon those facilities in place, and which case would, I guess, technically fall under the airport's control. Then we propose to lease those facilities as well from the airport.
Okay, thank you. And Mike, how does that interpretation of our plans for the master plan work if they were to extend their lease or get a new lease over there?
It does not. Our master plan calls for raising the improvements, which do revert to the airport at the end of the lease, which is in February. So that we can build the new general aviation complex. We've been working with Keith and others from the club. Most recent entrant was Rich Patterson. we'll continue to work with them to try to find a solution that works for everyone. But the improvements will belong to the airport district at the end of the lease, and it is part of the master plan to raise those improvements.
Okay, what is your timeline for starting to scrape that area over there?
We're probably looking at February, March, maybe as late as April. We already have bids. Those will come to the board in December for your action.
Okay. Thank you, Keith.
Just a comment, I can get with Mike and we can try to work out some other.
Yeah, Keith, this is not the place to negotiate.
Yeah, I'm not trying to negotiate. I'm just trying to bring up a point that we're willing to work and try to find an equitable, hopefully a solution. We want to stay on the airport in Monterey, and and I appreciate the board's support. Thank you.
And I think from a staff level, we appreciate that, and we will work with you to make sure that we can keep you on airport.
Cool.
Director Sani?
I have no questions. I thank Keith for coming today and introducing himself and just sharing a little bit with the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Keith, I appreciate that you bring this up to date, and I believe you and Mr. Lapierre probably need to get together sooner rather than later.
We have to.
And probably with Rich, so that everybody's in the room and everybody understands what we are dealing with, and then work toward a solution. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to close that item. That was a presentation, and we're going to go to board committee reports and
still have item 3, legal services agreement.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I totally missed that one and took a, yeah.
No worries.
No, I don't want to do that one. Okay, we have an amendment to the legal services agreement with Cole Huber LLP.
This is the legal agreement with Mr. Huber and his firm Cole Huber. It's an amendment to the existing agreement, which ostensibly extends the agreement for an additional year. And I believe it's at the same rates that we have paid in the past, if I recall.
It's slightly higher.
Slightly higher. Yeah. From staff level, we're very pleased with the relationship, and we would encourage the board to continue that relationship and approve the amendment to the legal services agreement.
And Madam Chair and board members, I want to do a couple of housekeeping things just to comply with the Government Code 1090. I want to make sure that you understand. Outside counsel is also reviewing the agreement to make sure that we comply with the Government Code in that regard. But so in this regard, I'm actually coming to you as not as your district counsel, but as a contractor at the moment. We have, and Chair Leffel, I mentioned with you before, we have been counsel for the airport since 2012. 11. I have been, engaged in that regard since was it 13? I enjoy being here in the airport. These are among the lowest rates that we have in our firm. Even rolling them forward, these are the lowest rates that we have in our firm, and I'm proud to say that. That tells you how much I like being here. And what I will tell you is these rates also, it is actually a one-sided lock-in maneuver. You're locking in my firm into those rates. You're actually free, if you want at any time, because it's a professional services agreement, to cancel the agreement at any time you want. So this is sort of what I call a one-sided lock-in for you. You're free to do whatever you want, but it actually binds us to these terms. So, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have as to the agreement.
Thank you. I'll open this item up to the public for comment. Not seeing any hands raised. I'm going to close public comment on this item and bring it back to the board. And I will start with you, Director Sani.
All right, I'm in safe driving mode somehow. I have no comment, and I'll try to get back on my video here. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Sabo?
Yeah, Scott, I can say that we've benefited an awful lot from the association with you. I had a question in the amendment to the agreement. Beginning July 1, 2021, the monthly retainer goes to $9,000 a month. I think I understand that. Beginning July 1, 2022, the monthly retainer for general services shall increase by $500. What does that mean? What is the general services? What is the retainer for, and what are we doing there? So could you help me with that a little bit?
Sure. The monthly services, the monthly retainer for general services basically outlines all of the services that our firm will provide to you that are covered under that retainer. And what it does is it gives the airport the ability to sort of ride the wave of work as it may be. We in some months we have incurred up to 80 or 90 hours worth of billing. In other months, it's as low as 30 or 40 hours of billing. And so, but the average, what the airport is able to do is you're able to pay the same monthly amount every single month, and we just ride the wave. If there's a lot more work, we have others that handle it within our firm. And months where there's less work, there's less work. But the monthly average works out to ballpark about 46 plus to 48 hours per month is about the average. So it gives some stability for the airport to know that you're going to be paying the same amount for general services every month. General services include things like coming to board meetings, reviewing staff reports, reviewing ordinances, drafting documents, reviewing contracts, talking to board members, all the included items. What it really does not include is litigation. It does not include some employee matters, like employee termination matters, or when employees want to have an administrative hearing over their job rights. Those are not included. Labor negotiations that come from time to time are not included. But other than that, almost everything other than that is included under the general services.
Okay, and I in listening to you, so this is a retainer. So can we exceed $9,500 in 2022? Is that my understanding?
No, Director, it's a flat fee that we pay. Our invoice from Cole Huber every month will be $9,500 for general services.
Okay, so
if we engage them to do some of the additional work that Scott just articulated, we get another invoice over and above that, but that's an irregular practice.
Okay, so this is a monthly fee, not necessarily just a retainer. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, it's a monthly retainer. Yes.
Well, okay, retainer to me means that we pay you money to just be around.
Oh no. That's what it says, monthly retainer for general services.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Director Miller.
Scott, I'm very appreciative of your work and your firm's work, and it has been a good relationship. So I certainly support moving forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Curcio.
Scott, thank you and your firm for the good services you provide for this airport. In some of my private businesses, have some legal fees and retainers, et cetera. This agreement is very fair. And as you stated earlier, it actually tends toward the low side. So I appreciate it, and I have no other questions.
And I'm going to say, as chair this year, I cannot thank Scott enough for taking calls in the evenings, on the weekends. We have talked in Home Depot. We've talked in his backyard. We've talked all over the place. So, and I know that from time to time, you all call him for questions and confirmation on things that you've got questions on. I think he's proven to be always available and accessible, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So I would entertain a motion on this item.
So moved.
Second,
And
Sabo seconds.
go ahead, Bill.
I think Sonny seconded ahead of you. So we have Curcio as a first, Sonny as a second. If we can have a roll call, please, Amanda.
Director Sani,
Yes.
Director Curcio,
Yes.
Director Sabo,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Chair Leffel.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to go to standing board committee reports and the acceptance of the department reports. I'm going to start with the department reports. Is there anybody that wants to speak about something that's on a department report that they're not going to report in their committee report? Is that clear? Okay, is there anyone from the public that would like to discuss the department reports or the committee reports? Time for public comment. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the board. And the first item is budget and finance. Director Curcio, would you like to begin?
Sure, I'll start it off. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, September continues improvement in activity at the airport. You'll learn more about that, obviously, with our air service reports. Things are continuing to move upward. Denver continues to do very well, and it goes up and up. Most of the businesses operating in the non-aviation and other operating categories continue to operate with near normal revenues. And the actual September budget, $487,791. The budget was $306,433. The actual $487,791. Enplanements continue to improve, 5,816 in August, 6,667. The September other operating revenues, 14.6 higher than budget, 12.6. The favorable variance resulted in higher utility charge backups of 2,000. September actual operating revenues versus budget, 601,697 versus 675. September revenues are higher than budget and operating expenses are lower, resulting in 113.9 thousand for September, which is 254,000.7 lower than the budgeted loss of 368. Accounts receivable are in excellent shape, and the staff continues to keep a close eye on the one or two areas that could still use a little bit of improvement, mostly with a couple of the airline agreements and rental car agreements. Marianne, that's all I have. You can fill in the blanks.
I think something of significance for the board is that the audit is still not complete, or it was not as of the time of our finance committee meeting, because our auditor is still struggling with the regulations for the CARES Act. So they understand that we have a reporting deadline, and that we're gonna bump up against it. So we anticipate that we will see our auditor at our December Finance Committee meeting, and that we will have an audit report for the full board in December.
Correct.
So we as a committee have not had any conversations with the audit staff. It has been solely through our airport staff, but Tim assures us that they have everything wrapped up except for how they're gonna treat the CARES Act. So we're hoping that's the case. I think it's important to know also that the car concessions continue to be kind of a surprise to everybody. And I think we're really learning is how the virus is changing things, but it's also just how much of off airport use there is now, particularly since some of the other local car agencies have closed down. And, I'm gonna leave everything else for the other committees because you're gonna flow into this. But I think, we're in good shape. The staff made the determination to not file for the CARES Act for this month because we are slightly ahead of reimbursements over expenses. And that is, it is due to the fact that because we amortize things, but we amortize them and pay them later, but we get charged for them in advance. So we'll let that catch up. We had a rather spirited discussion over it, and we'll see what happens next month. But I think from a finance committee meeting, we asked the staff to please monitor it because it was pointed out that we have salaries every month, we have some things every month, and that it might be more prudent that we make sure that we keep on track with doing those on a monthly basis. So that's the report, and I'll open it up for my board members for any questions. Director Sani? Director Sabo?
The question, thanks for that report, Gary and Mary Ann. On the matter of the audit, I would imagine that other airports that are subject to audit are struggling with that CARES Act, treatment of the CARES Act. Have we communicated with the FAA if in fact we blow our deadline for completion of the audit and providing the audit report? Will they give us a little grace period, do you think?
We will not miss the deadline. We will file. Tim's already got us prepared to file. We'll file what we have today to meet the deadline, and then file an amendment should we need to after the auditors have figured out how they're going to treat the CARES Act funding, and they're waiting for an answer from AICPA.
Okay, thanks. And were there any indications from the auditors as to any kind of issues or problems that might arise in the final audit report?
Tim, you want to take that one? Oops, gotta unmute Tim.
There was an issue that surfaced as part of the audit. It was a timing difference of when vendors submitted invoices and when we were preparing the financial statements. It came back as a recommendation by the auditors, or I'll see if I can phrase this the correct way. It shows up in single audit as a significant audit deficiency. And what that meant is we didn't capture everything. Cutoff didn't work because invoices were received very late from a vendor, and we were right in the middle of audit when they arrived. In fact, we had already delivered all the preliminary schedules for the audit. It came through the system of the airport, and basically we didn't jump and tell the auditors we had them. And they found them before we told them. That was the problem.
Okay.
Significant number, $1.8 million. And it all related to the infield project. So that will come out in the audit report.
Will it change the opinion? Will it change the opinion, Tim?
No,
No.
no.
That's good. Thank you.
Is that all, Director Sabo?
Yes, thank you.
Director Miller?
I have no questions. Thank you for the report.
Director Curcio, do you have anything else to add?
I do not, thank you.
Okay, that will conclude our report on budget and finance. Air Service Marketing Community Relations, Director Sabo and Director Sani.
I guess I'm going solo here. Director Sani seems to have been absorbed by her computer or something. We had a meeting, and the reports were not available for air carrier operations and noise, and to an extent the customer service reports. We were very pleased with the traffic, as you can see, and in your board packet. The concessions, we discussed the concessions, and the startup of the new ownership of the restaurant seems to be proceeding well, according to Mike, and we're very hopeful that Tim, I guess, is able to construct a plan here for providing meals out on the deck, even during the colder rainy periods, as well as possibly providing meals that you can pick up at the restaurant and eat them elsewhere in the airport. So it sounds like our restaurant is moving forward well. The rental car people are doing well, as Gary suggested, and the only real issue here is that some people are having some of our customers are having a little trouble with TSA, apparently. I don't know the extent to which that is an ongoing problem with TSA over touching some of our passengers, but Mike indicates that that's a TSA matter and we can't even comment on that. Of greatest concern is the continuation of some of our noise comments here, particularly in the area east of the airport. Mike has written an email letter to the TRACON, Northern California TRACON, to try to gain their ideas and their support for using more visual approaches on clear days to 28 left, which basically takes the traffic down Highway 68 and eliminates the need to use the GPS approach, which passes right over the Pasadena and Laguna Seca communities out there. And that's where the static is coming from. People don't understand why the air carriers are still using the GPS approach. And hopefully TRACON, the Northern California TRACON administrator, will get back to Mike with some positive suggestions on what we can do in terms of maybe a memorandum of understanding or some kind of an informal agreement. The problem seems to be more, in my opinion, this is a pilot's opinion, the NorCal isn't suggesting the pilots, when they're 30 miles, 40 miles out, to plan on using the visual approach. Well, they have the authority to do that, but they're not doing it. So hopefully we can get that created. In the Air Services Committee meeting, I've suggested as a pilot knowledgeable person that we do a little more outreach with some of our local airports that provide flight training, Watsonville, Reed Hillview, Hollister and so forth that use this airport for training, and they're some of the culprits in providing, doing the flights over Delray Oaks and over Casanova Oak Knolls, which is an irritant to those neighbors. And so hopefully going forward, we'll do a little bit more outreach to the airport managers at those locations and also the flight schools, and make sure that we also include to the maximum extent possible in our notices to airmen that we have noise restrictions here and we're serious about them. So that's primarily what went on at the Air Services Committee. Is Amanda back? Oh, Lisa, are you back again?
I am. Sorry, had connectivity challenges for a minute there. Yeah, I agree with what you've said, Bill. A couple things. The TSA, if people go in the packet, the issue was on 1023, and I think Mike had suggested that the operations crew would forward that, but again, it's a personnel matter. So we can let TSA know that there's been concerns, and that we would be doing that as an airport, but again, as it's personnel, we wouldn't be told further information. And then secondly, I think good news, we've got the Dallas-Fort Worth flight coming, the second flight in December. I think it was till January 2nd. It was
January 4th, yeah.
Okay, at this point. And then Seattle is still on for February at this point. So
nothing to the contrary.
Obviously, we all know that things can change amidst COVID and our realities right now, but those are at least some positive things coming forward potentially. Thanks, Bill. And thanks, Chair Leffel.
Thank you. Director Miller?
Yeah, I have no questions. Thank you for the report.
Director Curcio?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. The report that has been referred to in the comments from October 23rd is very, very troubling to me. And I understand the parameters, but if we have an outlet to at least voice our concern over this, I think we need to do that. It's completely unacceptable.
The comment has been referred to or will be referred to the Federal Security Director, who is in charge of TSA at this airport.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Airport Property Development and Leases, Director Miller?
Well, we have the minutes from that meeting. As you can see, the main thing we discussed was Monterey Jet Center's proposal to redo their pilot area lobby.
Carl, can you speak up? Gary's having a hard time hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So as you can see from the minutes, the biggest thing we talked about was the Jet Center's proposal to redo their lobby to the tune of about $1 to $1.5 million. This will be also improving their pilot rest area, the public area. In exchange for that, this meets, we gave them a lease extension and they had to do some repairs. We asked that before it goes before the board for our approval, that they come back with some artist renderings, and that will happen in December, I believe. Mike, are we on schedule for that?
We are, yes. It'll come back to the committee at the December lease committee meeting, and then to the full board at the December meeting.
And it would be our job to approve this, which will also give a second extension, correct?
It would be a small extension of about 3 years to the lease agreement with Monterey Air Park Associates, which is the ground lease upon which the facilities down there are built. They've asked for a 3-year extension. And that's part of what you'll be asked to act on at the next meeting.
Very good. Mike or Chair, maybe you can refresh my memory. We went back and forth on the deconstruction of 503. Where are we with that? Are we moving forward, or are we putting that on hold?
We have that as a capital improvements project, and we'll start moving in that direction in the near term here to demolish building, the small building over there. I always get confused whether that's 505 or 506, but it's a small building. I believe it to be 505.
Okay. And that's all. No plan for any lease extensions at this time. Excuse me, new projects or lease proposals at this time. Chair, can you think of anything else I forgot?
No, that's it. I think the most important thing is that we asked to have a full presentation to the full board for December for the FBO plans before we would actually entertain it or discuss it. So we talked about it in concept, but we had nothing firm, and we will not see anything firm until they're ready to present it in December. So we'll bring it in December. So it should be a kind of an exciting way to end our year with something real positive. So I think the other thing is, though, that all of our tenants are paying on time. Gary talked about it in the accounts receivables, but we're in great shape. The tenants are all happy to be here, and they're all paying. So we like that. Director Curcio, anything on this issue?
I have no questions.
Director Sabo?
No questions.
Director Sani? This was excited to read about the investment, and no other questions. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Local jurisdiction liaison, no meeting. LAFCO did not meet this month, although we did have a budget meeting, and we had an audit report out. So the audit was a good audit. It had no findings at all. And I think that we talked a little bit about budgeting going into this next year, and that we will try very hard as we start the budget process in January to hold the line and not increase the ask out to the districts. So we'll see. We are going to, LAFCO is going to incur some pretty big costs with the proposed takeover of CalAm and with the extended boundary of the Water Management District. So the Water Management District has to come before LAFCO for 2 issues. One, it will be changing its scope of work, so it will become a water retailer. They are saying they do not have to come before LAFCO for that, because at this point they are selling a small amount of water, I believe, to the Pebble Beach Company. So they're saying they already have done that and they don't need to extend to LAFCO. The feeling legally is that they do have to come to LAFCO because they are extending water retailing by a big amount with this new step. And the second thing is the addition of 56 parcels, which would take into account, if you remember a few years ago, CalAm took over the water, 2 water companies. They were for Hidden Hills and Bay Ridge in that area out Highway 68. So the Water Management District never changed its boundary to take those into the district. So they would have to also come to LAFCO for the change in the district. So it's going to be a fun time at LAFCO in the next few months. The dissolution of FORA, which was there, it was presented to us in July at the LAFCO meeting. We pulled it because we didn't believe that staff they had all of their presentation together. And it turns out that now there have been so many changes that it will still not be to LAFCO until maybe January. So although FORA is gone, the formal dissolution has still not been approved by LAFCO. And I understand that the county is auditing the FORA books and trying desperately to figure out where the money, what part of the money went to who, and how it's being divided up. So that is not a LAFCO issue, that's someone else's issue, but LAFCO will have to look at all of that when it comes forward. So those are the two major issues. We haven't had any other property boundaries or anything else that have been presented, although I understand we still have two major boundary changes in South County that will come forward sometime in the next few months. So some of those have been pending for 2 or 3 years already. It just, nothing moves quickly in this county, as we all know. So that's it. But the water issue is going to be the big issue. So I would open it up for questions. Gary?
Just want to confirm that I want to make sure I got this right. The district issue pertaining to CalAm is coming before LAFCO, did you say in June?
No, it is coming. It may be there. They have not applied to LAFCO yet. They have said in April, they said that they were going to apply to LAFCO and that everything would be done by September. And of course, we have not seen it yet. So the application has to come in. Once the application is in, the staff has to deem, and the LAFCO commission has to deem that it is complete. So there are many pieces that will make it complete. Once it is complete, the shot clock starts. And then there's a 90-day decision that LAFCO has to make on it. But keep in mind, complete is the key word there, that it's everything that is going to be required. So I don't know that we'll see it in December. Gary, we meet December the 7th. And there'll be a closed session on the items that are going to be needed to deem it complete. And we'll take it from there. But June, no, I did not say June at all.
So would it be 90 days after you hear it in closed session?
No. It'll be 90 days from whenever the application is accepted by the LAFCO commission as being complete.
Got it. Thank you.
And we haven't seen anything any time yet, so there's no way to know what we've got coming in. Director Miller?
No questions. Good luck with all that.
Thanks. Director Sabo?
No questions.
Director Sung?
I'll extend my luck as well. No questions.
Taking my vitamins. Thank you. Regional, and you all should know I was reelected as chair of the Budget Finance Committee, so I think I might have a job for life here. Regional Taxi Authority did not meet, I know that. They'll meet in July. Transportation Agency, Director Sabo?
Yeah, they didn't accomplish very much at their meeting. There will be no December meeting. They focused their attention on giving themselves awards over there. But I might add that they seem to have shifted their emphasis towards the expansion of Highway 156. That includes the Castroville interchange, which is already underway. And they've diminished their attention and focus on any improvements to Highway 68 traffic. And that is of some concern to me, because it used to get a lot of talk. Now it's slid down the list of priorities. And I think that's of direct interest to the airport here, getting our passengers from the Salinas Valley to the airport. But other than that, they elected a new board chair, and if my memory serves correctly, I think it's Ian Oglesby from Seaside is the new chair. So that's my report.
Director Curcio?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No question.
Director Sonny?
No questions.
Bill, I have a question. I think I read in the paper yesterday, or maybe I read it on a TMC bulletin, that they did get $20 million in federal funding for the 156 interchange. So that means that thing is going to move forward. Is that correct?
Well, they got some funding to acquire that. Apparently, Caltrans had some land over there that was dedicated towards expanding Highway 101 and straightening it out, and they've now abandoned that. And I think that is the recipients that part of the money that you're talking about. And in addition, they've gotten some more money for some of the area around the Castroville interchange. But I can report, investigate that a little bit more and report back next in December.
Okay, I read it as I think it was a release from Teresa Wright yesterday that they had received the notice that they had the 20 million. So that's good news for our area. Thank you. Special Districts Association, Director Miller.
We had a meeting last month, a Zoom meeting. It was attended by Lisa and Director Bill Sabo. The speaker was Robert Rivas, the assemblyman from the Salinas district. Very good. Interesting on how Sacramento's coping with this. We have our next meeting scheduled for January, so you'll be notified as we get closer to that. And Lisa stepped up, and she is on the nominating committee to select people for the new board next year. So thank you, Lisa, for doing that. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions of Director Miller?
Hey, Carl, you may know about this. Is Salinas Valley Hospital still a part of the Special Districts Association?
Yes.
They are, and they are the biggest financial contributor to LAFCO, I believe, because we all have to pay fees.
Yep, they are.
But
Okay.
they don't really attend the meetings in great regularity.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
MPAD. Director live here?
Yeah, we have a meeting this evening. The meeting is normally the second Wednesday, but because of the holiday, they moved it to the third. So that'll be tonight at 6 o'clock.
Okay. Thank you. And did they have meeting last month?
We had, last month I reported on the last two meetings. So yes, we had.
Oh, but they had a meeting, they didn't have a meeting after our meeting.
No, they had a meeting prior to our
Because
meeting.
I think you're always going to the meeting after
Yeah,
our
I am.
meeting.
Now that we've moved to the third Wednesday, there will likely be the ability to report because they typically meet on the second Wednesday. So,
Okay, good. Okay, that closes the board reports and committee reports. And you want to take 5 and then we'll go to closed session?
We can do that. I might suggest that you may want to open up for public comment on closed session before we go into closed session, because you do have 3 members of the public still there.
All right. I will open this up to public comment on the items that are listed on the agenda on closed session.
If any member of the public wishes to comment on the items on closed session, please use the raise hand function. It appears no one is.
Okay, I see none, so I'm going to close public comment on the 3 items.
Mary Ann, this is Director Sabo. Are we going to have any questions that come about from the department reports?
I called for that when we started that whole section, Bill. I said, if we have any comments or questions on the department reports, can we have them now before we have the committee reports? So did you have something?
Well, yeah, they were minor items. Yeah, I'll do it real quickly. The fire department reported that they've been providing services related to the fires and getting reimbursed from the state. Does any of that reimbursement, Mike, are we entitled to any of that reimbursement? I think they're using our firefighters and possibly one of our vehicles. Is that?
No, they're not using our vehicles at all. Our vehicles never responded to the mutual aid calls for fire support. So not using our vehicles at all. And the city is required to provide a level of staffing in the station to meet FAA requirement. They backfilled, if they took one of these officers, they backfilled with someone else. So no, we're not entitled to reimbursement there either.
Okay, and then I noticed that we have a new chief, at least a temporary chief over at Delray Oaks. Have you met with the new chief over there regarding
yeah,
to us?
Yeah, Chris Borkwin is someone who's very familiar out here.
So you have confidence in the new chief?
Yeah, he's actually a very, very capable person.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to give you all of 5 minutes. So it's 12:39. So be back at 12:45. And we will go into closed session. Does that give you enough time to get hooked up and be back? Yes? Okay.
Hopefully.
Minutes.
Leave this
Clock's
one.
running.
Okay, and Amanda is going to leave this meeting open. So if you all will leave this meeting, we'll go into to the one I sent before.